Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of council, Monday, March 23rd, 2026. And it is being held in the council committee room at 1394 Pine Avenue, Trail BC, and also via Zoom live meeting commencing at 2 o'clock for committee of the whole, immediately followed by the closed council meeting and reconvening at 6 p.m. for the regular council meeting. Meeting webinars are recorded and published on the city's YouTube site at trail.ca/YouTube. So I'd like to call it to order, and the first item on the agenda is the resolution that the agenda for the regular council meeting on March 23rd, 2026 be adopted. And all those in favor? Thank you, that was carried. And a resolution to resolve into the committee of the whole, please. Thank you. A second. All those in favor? And that was carried. So we have some delegations today. Our first one is the departmental verbal updates, and we have our airport manager, Rinko, first.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Through the chair, I'll provide an update for the Trail Region Airport. Starting off with our passenger count through the month of February, which consisted of 52 scheduled flights with 1,323 inbound and outbound passengers. So of those 52 scheduled flights, there were 19 cancellations, consisting of 17 weather cancellations and 2 aircraft maintenance cancellations. The weather cancellations resulted in 3 Pacific Coastal Airlines shuttle bus days to and from Penticton Airport, shuttling a total of 129 passengers. The shuttle bus will continue as required until March 31st for this year, and then they'll be stopping for the remainder of the spring, summer, and then at this point in time, still, I believe they want to start it off again next October, November timeframe. But more will be determined on that because there is a changeover in management of the Coastal Airlines as we speak, so there'll be more to come on that. So the February passenger count was up from this year, was up 162 passengers in comparison to February of last year. So the numbers are looking good considering we did have over weather cancellations. The airport has been conducting, as of last week, was conducting tree topping and the removal project with the adjacent Beaver Creek Provincial Park exact property. The project was completed as of today. So moving forward, we will be doing another survey per se of that those approach paths within 3-year time frame. So it was a success. We worked with Parks. Parks was happy. It was all conducted. Tech was fantastic as well. They gave us the authorization and access to the property, so everything went good smooth. Airport will also be conducting tree removal of numerous dead trees along Highway 22A. I'm working right now with the ministry on permits and approvals. We have selected a contractor to conduct the work, and the dates of this project will be determined within the next couple of weeks. The airport's aviation and diesel fuel tanks were cleaned on March the 18th, so we're good again on those for another 4 years. The airport terminal was repainted last week, so we've gone to a more neutral gray color inside the terminal as opposed to the past kind of that baby blue, that color in it. And moving forward, we'll also be painting the external of the airport as well to a more neutral color. Because right now there's a bunch of different pastel shades that are going. We had discussed with the committee that we'd like to get that painted as well to add a more professional neutral color that's on there. So. For capital projects, we're still waiting. Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll get a word from the ECAP, whether we get a grant towards our airport master plan. So again, their deadline for that is March 31st to make decisions. So that should be done sometime this week. So the airport will be showcasing artwork from a local artist. Her name is Lisa Huth. It's going to be through the Visac Gallery, and that's going to be commencing on the 2nd of April until the 30th of April. So we'll be looking with the airport committee to maybe put something together for a centerpiece, like through the media or something to showcase her artwork, something along that line. And looking ahead is the airport will be transitioning to a mobile app / online pay system for airport parking. The current parking ticket machine It's come to an end of life pretty much. It's no longer functioning as it should. Vendor selection and implementation will be established in the coming weeks, so this should be a little easier for people rather than having display tickets to their vehicles. Everything nowadays is pretty much modernized in most airports. And it's done either online or through the app, through whichever vendor system that you choose to go. So should be in place probably in about 3 months. And that's everything I have for the moment. I'll let Bradley answer any questions that comes to me.
Okay, thank you so much. Any questions from council?
Making it too easy on the
If I could, Mayor,
Sure.
just that, Manager Morley was also mentioning that although we would be looking at this app, there would still be the function if you were not savvy in the computers to go into the terminal and kind of pay for your parking. So that's one thing, just to be aware that it wouldn't exclude those that are unfamiliar with it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we have corporate services and the general manager of corporate services, Jared.
No, I'll take that.
Okay.
On behalf of
I'm so
Manager-
used to you doing the
General
law.
Manager of Corporate Services, who will be returning from vacation soon.
Mhm.
So in terms of corporate services update, staff has completed the review of the elections bylaw that will be coming before council at the next meeting on April 13th. We continue to work on additional bylaw, updates, including the animal control bylaw and the fire safety and prevention bylaw as previously directed by council. And those will be coming to you in the timeframes requested. I'm also going to be providing an update on communications and events, because, in the absence of, that manager, who has continued to support the work for the 2026 visitor services guide and the spring and summer leisure guide. I believe the leisure guide is now available. And the visitor guide is available.
No, I'll speak to that.
Okay, thank you, sir. There's been several published communications out of that department, including the spring yard and garden waste schedule, which will be starting in early April. The schedule for that is now available on the city's website. The website redesign project, it has commenced with the completion of usability testing and software and add-on support functionality. And the manager of communications and events continues to support the work of Trails 125 celebrations, including promotional items that are being purchased for that event, for the events this year, as well as new street banners. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from council? No? Okay, thank you so much. And on to Museum Archives and Visitor Center Manager, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. So we were kindly offered the BC Games Cauldron, which is now in your garage downstairs. So thanks for.
On fire?
I don't think it was working, actually. That's they did it, they had a makeshift one.
Yes, so we don't have the makeshift one.
No.
Makeshift one.
The makeshift one, I think, was somebody's fire pit.
Yes.
But this is pretty cool, and it's not gonna take up too much space, but it will leave your space, I promise. We were just sort of asked on the fly, but the board has been very cognizant of picking up little promotional pieces. We've got all the medals, all the bronze, silver, gold, all the things that we've never actually got from previous games, so it's been really great, and we know it'll make a nice addition to the collection. We still have our 4 BC Games exhibits up, but we'll leave them up for a little bit because it's great to show some of these items for longer term than just a week. But we will transition those 3 cases back to Little League once the provincials are gearing up. And yeah, we'll probably keep the current games case in for a while because we've got all these great pieces now. I think it was a really good success based on the traffic in the visitor center, and we did have quite a few people coming through. There were a lot of parents who did come to watch their children compete. They were pleased with the games. They were really pleased with the community, surprisingly pleased with the community, and many had been to Roslyn Nelson and had never ventured this way. So they thought the river was gorgeous, the weather really helped, I think,
Mhm.
and so always
Yeah.
does, what do they say, 90% of a good event is weather. And I think that, made things all the more better for everybody. We have renewed our contract with Destination BC. So this is the organization with which we partner to support funding of the Visitor Information Center. So we're part of the Visitor Information Network. We're a designated visitor center. And we receive an annual operating grant of $15,000 to support those efforts. So that was renewed. Our summer student application window closed last week, and thank you to Sandy for compiling all of those applications. We received 30 for 2 positions, so we'll be sifting through those pretty heavily. I'll be doing that this week and scheduling interviews for next week. Our summer season is typically 16 weeks, beginning of May to the very end of August. And our students support all aspects of the museum, the archives, and the visitor center operations. And this year they'll be assisting with our Trail Tales project, which is one of the components of the Trail 125, where we'll be conducting that covert community engagement. Phase 2 of our deaccessioning project and digitization efforts of our photograph collection. We're down a volunteer who's had some medical issues. So that aspect of our accessioning and that workflow has come to a bit of a halt, so we need to catch up. And I've received word last week that we were approved for a funding offer from Young Canada Works to support one of those positions, so that's great news. We're still waiting to hear in Canada Summer Jobs, but that funding stream has been pretty unreliable the last couple of years, and it's not a huge amount of money for municipalities. We only get 50% as opposed to 100% of the ask. But Young Canada Works hopefully will be close to the full ask. We'll see. I'll let you know when I get the and the editorial content for the 2026 tourism/commemorative guide is complete, and we've seen a few of the iterations, working hard on that over the weekend to meet the press's deadline of a dummy by this week. And I'm really pleased with the way it looks. It's far more professional than the previous versions. And Claire and I were working pretty diligently alongside the sales team to fill those. Thank you for your ad today.
Yes, thank you. I knew.
Rat counts our heads and knuckles for her delay, but we got it and it's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I could work in sales. Constantly pestering people. But we're really pleased with the people that did choose to step up and take our ads this year. And many were really congratulatory in their ads, congratulating the city on 125 years, which is nice. And then sharing how long they've been in business. So it's nice. With respect to Trail 125, our plans are coming together. We've seen some really great work by the augmented reality team who are animating the flood mural down on the side of the river bell, and it's really, really cool. We've provided them with lots of imagery, a soundtrack to a 1948 flood video that they've incorporated into that. So I'm really pleased with how that's coming together. We're focusing on ordering supplies for the Trail Tales component, which is the branded tent, things like that. But of course, we don't want to be too specific with branding. We don't want to use the 125 logo on the main tent. We just want to use that in certain aspects because we want this to be used over and over again. We don't want to just dedicate it strictly to this. Our page turner display, which is currently on display in the museum, will undergo a makeover. So we're working with Speed Pro to help us redeco that. And Michelle Gardner at Bonita Plaza has been really kind to allow us to display that in 2 spots. So this will be the space where once we start collecting this information, people a photo on one side, and you can turn that 8.5 by 11 frame around, and then you read about what their reflections are. It's going to be a really nice engagement piece out there. And we'll be welcoming our scavenger hunt contractor soon as the weather improves. Viewing and recording pod, is nearly designed, and we'll be able to easily install that in-house. We won't require the exhibit designer to come all the way here. Speaking of them, they are here Wednesday to install our new early industry exhibit, and that exhibit is a look at the smelter's insular operating structure, whereby if they needed something, they made it. If they needed something painted, they hired red seal painters. So everything they needed, they were able to make and do, which is unlike the way they do things now with more contractors. So additionally, the donation of the Toledo Troy ounce scale, which was purchased in around 1931, is going to be going on display, and that helps to interpret how historically and how long the troy ounce is used in measuring precious metals, which of course is produced here in Trail, gold, silver, those sorts of things. So it's really exciting to get those out of our research room and on display finally. So they'll be here this week. It's very exciting. And that'll be a wrap on that 2025 capital project. For 2026, we submitted that capital budget, much smaller scale, small scale floor scrubber for our concrete floors, replacement programming tables, which are used daily, multiple times. They're ready to go. Fit painting of the facility and some surveillance changes. And looking ahead, as you know, the Riverfront Center will be hosting the AKBLG's Friday reception on April 17th. And Samantha and I have solidified all of our vendors. We're now working on all the pretty things on the way out. So we hope you'll be pleased. And the next month we'll be prepping for onboarding our new summer staff, which will include customer service fundamentals through Destination BC and our in-house local tourism amenity package. So familiarizing them with what we have going on here. And this encourages not our summer students to build confidence when prepping to engage with visitors. There's less and less inclination to want to interact face to face. I'm sure you all know we would rather be on our phones and texting, and it's easier to email someone, but not in this world. And they have to feel confident and comfortable. And it's not necessarily you have to know all the answers, but you should know where to find them. And that's the message we try to impart. And our literature rack will soon be replaced with all the new guides. It's that season as we're doing. Printing presses are working hard. And just to be aware, I will be away from Wednesday to Friday this week. But that's great. And do you like Miss Counselor Benson?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
We cut out the porta potties.
Oh,
Yeah.
every day like Silver City. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, and I'll be working with Jared to put some new imagery in council chambers as well.
Oh, nice.
So we thought I'm sort of thinking of a concept around a then and now. So an image from the archival collection and try to replicate that image now next to it, or something like that. If that's of interest.
Okay, is there any questions from council? No. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, finance department.
I know council will probably tire of my voice by the end of today's meeting, so I'll make it brief just in that we are expecting the auditors on site next week to get the year-end audit completed. So that's a good sign for us that we're prepared for them and have some finishing touches, but feeling really confident that we'll be able to get that underway efficiently. That'll help us with kind of numbers into April and making sure that what I'm projecting here, let you know if there's any changes, but that's all I have to say, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Colin. We look forward to hearing more from you later. Okay, on to planning, our manager of planning and climate action. Welcome, Chris.
Afternoon. So just to start with a brief project milestone, following council resolution in the last meeting, the OSP has been amended and is out for legal review and referrals, with agency comments still incoming. Once that referral period is up, staff will go through the comments received and bring forward an option for a amended draft OCP with various comments incorporated. Few operational updates. The accessibility committee initial meeting took place March 2nd. 10 out of the 11 members were in attendance. And it served as a great introductory session going over the committee purpose, procedure, and terms of reference. Understanding we're a bit behind on the accessibility topic since regulation came into effect in 2023, staff will continue to hold this meeting every month with the goal to bring forward grant opportunities for the committee, identify barriers to accessibility, and ultimately develop a city accessibility plan. With that in mind, the next accessibility committee meeting is scheduled for April 20th. The Local Government Development Approval Program, LGDAP for short, application was finalized and submitted following council's resolution to proceed last meeting. When the decision is made by UBCM grant assessors, staff will provide a update to council. And finally, the RFP has been out for the climate resilient tree study in the downtown core and was recently extended for 2 weeks after an addendum was added to clarify proponents' questions last week. While we are still within the procurement process, I can say that we've received a significant amount of interest from potential proponents. I think we've received 5 notice of intents to bid so far.
Wow.
That's it for the brief update right now. Have to answer any questions.
What about that accessibility?
Any questions for Chris? No? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, staff reports. We have the monthly report report on invoices paid for the municipal services of February 2026. Is there any questions on that report? Okay, the recommendation is that council consider and resolve to receive for information the report on invoices paid for municipal services February 2026. All those in favor? Thank you, that was carried. Abe, Chris, you're back up, I think. A proposed development various permit on 3181, I was present. Or setback reduction to side yard.
Awesome. On February 27th, the city received an application for a variance to zoning bylaw section 6.5E to reduce the required side yard setback from 1.2 meters to 0.59 meters on an R1 zone lot. The purpose of this variance is to permit a second story addition to a single family dwelling located at 3181 Irish Crescent, which will be 8 meters in height. It is worth noting that the current dwelling, which was constructed in 1953, is partially located within the current side yard setback, and a vertical addition would be subject to current day setback regulations. Staff sent out notifications on March 12th, to properties within 50 meters of the subject property, as per the requirement under the Local Government Act, and we haven't received any neighborhood objection. Staff do not anticipate significant negative impacts from the requested variance and have recommended that council approve the issuance of the variance permit. Because the city has not received any neighborhood concern, and because the variance is not anticipated to cause significant negative neighborhood impact, staff do request an amendment to the recommendation on the board to bring this item forward in tonight's regular council meeting. I understand that developers are ready to actually get to work, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Hanson.
Thank you, through the chair. So basically, they're just adding it on the existing structure right now. So their setback has always been this big from when the house was constructed. So it's not like it's a new thing that they've changed. They're working off the existing footprint that the house already has.
Through the chair, so to speak, yes, they're looking for a specific vertical addition that's not going to project any closer than the existing building. Now it was built in 1953, so I haven't gone far back into the zoning bylaws to see what the setback regulations were today, but yeah, any new build is subject to today's regulations.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move the recommendation that the city of Trail authorize the issuance of development variance permit DBP 26-11 for lot 16, block 1, district lot 4598, Kootenai District Plan 2551, located at 3181 Irish Crescent, Trail, BC. Thank you. All those in favor? And thank you, that was carried. Okay, on to our 2026 operating budget. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Mr. McFlynn.
Yes, thanks, Mayor, Council. I'm wondering if I could just deviate slightly and maybe start with the capital budget before we tackle the operating budget, if that's if anyone's concerned. Nope, okay. All right. So, I know that maybe some of the documents might have small numbers, so I'm gonna have to read certain questions. I don't know, I'm going to go through this sort of on a update as to where we were at and what happened in 2025, 2026, what we're expecting here, understanding that we are coming to the end of March, or almost into 3 months into 2026. And that will be the focus, but happy to take questions, happy to speak to any areas or find out from council if there's additional work or thought processes or information that you need on any of the capital projects. Do know on a couple of them, we'll get to them. Some of you are highlighted in yellow because I have some questions myself. So I was trying to make that evident to council as well. The other part that we'll look at is the funding sources that we mainly use So I've got some spreadsheets to sort of speak to, here's what happens to the different reserves as we are looking at the capital plan as we move forward. I will be sort of leaning on looking at row numbers on the left-hand side and then columns on the top. So if you're trying to keep with me and I'm saying, it's like Battleship M35 sort of idea, then you'll hopefully be able to stay with me on what we're looking at on the different numbers. Sorry, this is the document I should share that with.
That's the capital one?
It is the capital. And is it there? It should be there.
What's the capital, what is it?
That's the second, the
General
second link.
5-year
capital
capital.
budget?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. So in the IT world, didn't get maybe on the phone component is sort of the biggest one that was an expectation. What we ran into there was a question about the direction. Most of the phones today are going more obviously VoIP kind of a component, and so what type of handsets do we need? We also know that as we've made some changes recently and being able to have moving towards our Office 365, having Teams, some of the questions come up about, there are certain places you need a phone on your desk, but there are other places that you don't need a phone. We maybe need a headset. So these were some of the conversations that went on during the year and looking at what is the best way that we're served. So this is under row 25. And again, I'm looking at column basically M, N, and O kind of thing. You'll see that that there was no activity in that in the current year. When I look below, we have the website 26. Now again, we would have brought that back to council when we went out to the website, and we found out that no one was willing to upgrade our website for the budget that we had, and we kind of went back to council and said, hey, we're going to undertake this. We got council's permission to look at that into 2026 and a larger budget. So you're kind of following that sort of string right there. The other component there in the copiers, we did replace a number of some of the copiers we had, so we were a bit over budget there, but again, it's new equipment for printing had been replaced in quite a while. I'm going to try to stay in the theme as we go through each area. So the one thing that you'll notice in the 2025 column, so under P, is that we have some disaster recovery servers that were already kind of purchased, but we're going to have a cost for. The other big one there is the council chambers replacement. So that's one of the ones that involved. We know the council gave us some approval to use the COVID funding to be able to pay for the electronic portion of this. But as you can see, there's no sense in trying to put this equipment up with the walls that we had in there. We had a lack, as we know, of electrical connections. And so as I think if you've been in there recently, you know that we will have the desk around the U's. There will be plugins right there for people's equipment, whether it's their laptops, computers, whatnot, will be in that space. But so this is the cost in addition of the IT component for these two spaces, with obviously the majority of it being in council chambers. This includes the cost of some new desks that are going to be going around that. We'll get a view of that, but General Manager Minor was able to recycle or reuse the wood that we got out of the 900 Spokane building. So I think it looks quite nice. The other piece that will be part of that is that you'll get some new chairs, and so some real benefits. I think maybe a comfort chair for those that we have to sit here for long periods of time. So that's a good news story. And for those that are taller on council, you won't be banging your knees into the into the desk. And so all of that equipment is going to disappear. So it won't be around. We're not allowing Sarah Benson to take that and put it into any type of exhibit at the Riverfront Center. So anyway, just letting you know on that component. One of the bigger pieces too is that we noted that the wireless in a number of our departments, whether or not that's at the Riverfront Center, at Public Works, the Aquatic Center here, that's getting a boost. So we're going to improve that. That equipment is dated, so I think that will help not only for employees that are here, but those that are using it on the public Wi-Fi. Down below, you will see that on the funding side, maybe I've taken a bit of a liberty there. And so this is under rows 44 and 45. You'll see that we're using the capital projects reserve for a significant amount of this funding for the capital work in 2026. But the 220 is basically out of the COVID funding is what we're going to use to be able to get the council chambers up to a standard that's acceptable. I really believe and I'm confident or know that it is in line with where the funding was given, so that if we have people attending virtually, and that's all appropriate. Can move on now. If there's any questions, please, I would just ask council, if you have any questions, please just put up your hand. Yes.
Wonderful.
Cool.
Through the chair. The 50K for the wireless, number one, thank you, great idea.
Not mine, IT comes in.
Great idea, IT.
Okay, yes,
On behalf of your team.
yes,
And is that wouldn't be from the COVID funding, that would be from the reserves?
that's correct, yes. Great question. So if I'm moving now down.
I guess one
Yes.
question, does that deplete our COVID funding reserve then?
It will, yes, and I have some information on that. Great question. We will still have money left over from not only this request, but another request on how we use some of it. We still have remaining funds of COVID even after that, so.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. If we move down into row 104 to 113, I guess I should say, the building and facilities, we've kind of had this, Unicorn Daycare has been on the books, but we're finally kicking that off. And so that's why you'll see the 2.5, and that's sort of an estimation as we get into the building. Will it be 2.5? Will it be 2.2? And then the remaining funding that's coming into 2027, but that's sort of, if you're looking at 26 and 27, the expectation is that is all 100% grant funded. And so that's where those amounts sit. So again, you would see down below as well under row 121, provincial grant funding that sort of matches the costs that are above there. So that's again under row P and Canada. CCTV. So I know that this has been one that has, maybe not moved as fast as council would have liked. We are also, I think from the information that we have gleaned, sometimes it can be good that we have taken a chance to step back and make sure that we get a product that's going to do what we want to do. We've had a number of meetings with Petiting in particular, and how successful they have been with the not only the cameras that they have, but they can move them. But it's also the service of monitoring them, and I guess using AI, making sure that this is something that doesn't unnecessarily tag RCMP to come down for leaves blowing or whatever. It's a legit sort of like, whether or not we're seeing fire, we're seeing physical abuse, those sorts of things. So we're working slowly towards that. So this component of the project, while it's dropping from previous years, is about getting the cameras out. Believe that this funding here will get us the cameras. We do definitely need to look internally, and where we have that is sort of in our public works budget as far as the funding that we currently have for doing monitoring now, whether or not that's security, that vendors that we have that are doing that work, that we're getting and looking at, are we getting value for that? And what is what is the solution that we need? So you kind of are seeing here the capital component of it. There will be a cost on the operating, but it is sort of sitting inside, and we believe can be funded by the current public works budget that we have. Special projects, that's just one for council there. We've been looking at something in town that downtown that we wanted to take care of, so providing some funding for that, and also allowing not only the potential purchase, but also if you were doing some mediation, so sort of a round number there to give council some flexibility as to what to do next if you were to finalize some purchases in the downtown. That money as well, just to be clear, is under row 122. It's the 200,000. You'll see that, and then in fact under land sale reserve. Land sale reserve is something that gets built up when we do sell land out there. The province has rules on the community charter that you say, not so much here, but if you had a whole bunch of land that you weren't selling a bunch of land to fund your operations because you didn't want to raise your taxes, right? You need to take that funding, put it in the reserve, and then it needs to be used towards capital purchases. So again, it's not so much an issue with trail, but can be in other communities where it may be reluctant on raising taxes and again selling land to fund operations. So that's what we're saying. Yes, okay, so if I'm gonna move down, we can just see any questions under RCMP. And you'll see that we had 315,000 of roof replacement money in 2024. five that didn't move forward. What we are seeing and getting an understanding of and have had consultants already looking at and preparing the RFP that should be out shortly is to take care of the roof. Again, it's interesting because as the roof is replacing, the same time that the loan is coming off it, that the city got to actually build it, so it's not uncommon to have roofs only last X amount of period of time, so that's one of those things that is important. Also, what's really important is that there's a sharing ratio. So inside the building, even though it is a trail detachment, we have basically a 60-40 split of 60% of the officers would be for the city of Trail sort of mandate of your size of community. Actually, it's 12, but we have an extra additional 2 that we pay for. The council is aware of that in the approved program, our crime reduction unit program. The other 40% relates to the staff that would, use the facility, but be going to Montrose, traveling into Fruitvale, Warfield, or Roslyn as far as whatever crime and or policing services they would provide. So in that relationship, when we go and do these capital projects, we go to them and say, here's what's going to cost. And they say, okay, we're going to fund our portion of that cost. So that we do that also in the operating side, when we a part of the debt that we are paying and or heat, hydro, snow plowing. So we send them an invoice at the end of the year and say, here's 100% of the costs, you owe us 40%. And so then they pay us on that. So again, you were wondering, okay, why, it's good to know that we're sharing this with the province because we all have one trail attachment to live under. So.
To
Go
the
ahead.
chair. So this number is the total number, and then from this, we would bill the province for
Yes.
40% of.
Exactly. So if you look down below, you will see that the RCMP capital funding and then capital projects.
Yeah.
Reserved. So
Okay.
that's where those 2% are coming from. Cemetery, I think the council is aware that we get both operating funding and capital funding. And it's through the East End 7 services for cemetery. So we collect taxation from the entire area because the entire area is able to use and use the facility as far as I guess we say the local rate for the cemetery. So again, one of those components down below, you might be saying, hey, you've got some funding, but then you've got some deferred revenue. Well, you'll notice that in 2025, we had a number of projects that we wanted to get done. Some of them didn't get done. So I've asked for capital funding. You don't use the capital funding, you kind of carry forward into the next year. So we've got a bit of capital funding carry forward. One thing I think that's really important here, and I really want to thank the staff, is looking into the fact that we had this deferred capital revenue, is the use of water. Now, last year, not as bad as other years when it's been hot, we get potable water, so treated water comes from Roslyn, and then we use that for irrigation. There's times when they say, sorry, everyone is cut off and there's no more water, and that doesn't always look good for the cemetery itself. I think people understand it, but also the fact that using potable water is, the fact that you're using, someone's already treated it for human consumption and you're just putting it on the grass isn't the most efficient. So we are in the current year looking at the engineering and the ability to put in a well. So again, when we get the bills for the water that we use, because we are Roslyn's largest user, it may take some time to pay it off, but basically what we're seeing is sort of in that line of between, depending on how much we use, between 5 and 10 years, we would pay back the cost of having a well there. And also in using the well, you're not having it treated water being kind of put on the grasses. Going to be curious, we're going to do the investigations. That's in 2026, engineering and that sort of thing. So for 2027, be able to come back and say, we think this is what we need. It's a pretty big number, as you can see, even that we slotted into 2027, based on it's not inexpensive to put in the well at a size that we would need to draw and to be able to take care of the irrigation. At the same time, which I also appreciate with staff, is that there is a goal to upgrade the irrigation, because there's nothing worse than having the irrigation system that has holes in it, so that even though you're using this water from Roslyn, it's not actually getting out to the garden sites because you've got a break or you're not getting the flow out to the far ends of the cemetery, and making it, a green and a place that is respectful to those that are there. And the other big thing that that staff are looking for is a change in some software. So take some planning, but it will be, so if you have, your loved one is in a spot, you will be able to go on the GPS and then you will be able to find out where they are in the cemetery. So it's kind of one of those things that's not uncommon in bigger locations. Sorry.
That's all we get from my mom.
Okay.
Called once, asked, "So where's your dad?" It's like,
Right.
he's gone. She was at the cemetery looking for him.
Yes. So my hope is that will solve, because I mean, it's not easy, especially with, we do our best, but there is sort of work on sinkers and the ground itself, and as things move on, but if you knew where your loved one was, you'd be able to call that up and then GPS and get yourself to that location. So I think it's an efficient
that.
tool, and so that's something as well that we're putting in. On top of that's an additional feature to just having software that helps us. Making sure that we don't sell the same lot twice, or that we don't, we end up making sure that we're accurate in how we're doing it on behalf of everybody. And yes,
I imagine that would also, we probably use for the largest customer of Rossland's system, that's probably gonna help them a lot down the road too, when it's, cause their reservoir's not that big
Exactly,
anyway, right?
right.
So that's great.
yes, I think it's very valuable. Again, wait till I get the results and they come back and say, hey, this is not the payoff that we thought it was,
Yeah.
maybe we need to look at something different. They also, are recognizing they've got builds going on there. The other thing that we did talk about, which is just still the very preliminary, is where that well can be placed so that it provides the water for where we are.
Mhm.
There is sort of that happy valley, so they also, I think, have some hay fields and different things, so is there a way to actually assist them with, I think, where some potable water gets used on some of the
Yeah.
farming kind of thing, so we're also in conversations with them as we look at this, so if it gets to a place of like, hey, we might be able to work to, prices this, or we might be able to work together, but right now we want to get the information to see if we can be successful on getting us off of their.
Would you use the well for the public washroom as well?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would think maybe, I don't know. It's a good, interesting thought. Not too many people drinking water. I know that we've got like one of those containers for
Yeah.
for water, and if someone's washing their hands, maybe you just have to be able to put up a sign that says, but we still have the connection, I think, for the water, so if you were using way less water for flushing and not, that's a possibility, but again, haven't crossed that
Okay.
bridge. Hopefully, they would let us know, if that's an option for.
So Colin.
Yes.
The Community Works Fund, is that the end of that? We're not
No,
receiving, or we just haven't?
and no, well, again, good question there. We obviously have the Community Works Fund. Council has sort of directed that we be using that to focus on the water system. You will see that a little bit later, I am asking for a little bit of a lean in and to try to balance the pressure that we're getting for certain capital projects. And we'll talk about that, I think, on the next page.
Okay.
But yes, I think probably for me, when that is not being asked for these particular requests. But you will see it pop up here in the next page here. So the airport, we had talked with council about the airport master plan. See, as we've been working through the numbers, what we expect that to be. We do have, if we get, hopefully we would know in the next little while, that if we get the grant, which is under row 182, we had asked for the money last year, and I think we had found out late that we weren't successful. We've come back again, expecting the cost to be $65,000 to do the master plan. It's very important to have a master plan done, especially if you want to get grants in the future things. There isn't a huge amount here, but if we find out in the next week, I could be coming, this is what I'm saying on some of these adjustments, I could be coming back for in the next couple of weeks saying, hey, we didn't get the funding, we need to, pay for the whole thing ourselves. Not ideal, but it's not a huge cost, but that would be something that I think could be adjusted. There is a yellow sticker with a question mark at 2026 because the manager was asking about equipment hanger. Now, this would not be for planes, we don't have planes, but we do have some snow plows, backhoes, those sorts of things. And right now they do the best that they can to tarp them or whatnot, but the elements, it's not great for equipment to be out. It's a question mark, and I put it there because there's some looking around of what does it cost. Bit nervous on what these things cost because any kind of building these days is not inexpensive, but it is something that I think that we need to be looking at. So just bringing it also to council's attention as where we're at today. I'm sensing if anything comes up, likelihood is that this is going to be a conversation for 2027 onward anyway, but wanted to put it on the radar for council. This is one that doesn't make sense to have equipment, and we do try to help our, you know, I wouldn't say the little brother of the airport, but when we rotated some equipment from Public Works, a lot of times like, hey, you need this snow blower, or hey, do you need this piece of equipment? So not necessarily getting the newest equipment, although their plow truck is relatively new. But again, anytime you can get it out of that elements and out of that sun, especially in the sun, I think it's important for us to look at that. Any questions on the airport? And the other piece too is a lot of these too, you look at, hey, wow, we get this done and we don't have any costs at all for the next 4 years in the airport. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure. I have a feeling that once we get the master plan, there will be some, hey, you need to update this or we need to do that. So, but right now we don't have any numbers. And so that's why until we get a master plan, they're kind of in a blank stage. Transportation capital, couple things that we sort of looked at it, and this wouldn't necessarily be. This is a conversation that sort of happened internally. It's, you know, we have operating budgets to do working on letdowns and things like that. So why are we coming to capital here? We've got budget and operating. We should be able to handle these projects. We did handle them internally this year. So when you're saying, hey, did you not do this work? It's like, actually, we did do the work. We just didn't put the pressure on the capital reserve budget for this. We handled it with inside the operating budget, which I think is the right way to work on that. And the general manager is there's a few other asks in that sort of same dollar amount, and those have been put into operations for the current year and ongoing. So again, we're talking about some repairs, letdowns, those sorts of things, different projects that cost more and that are different. That's why you'll see that in here. One thing that is interesting is that you'll see the 1,500. So this is under It's too small for me. Row 199. So the 1,500 block, Second Avenue, sidewalk, drainage, safety, RDKB synergy is what it said. So this was the idea that regional district wanted to do some big improvements based on bus stops and that sort of thing. Things changed with that particular service in light of them not being allowed to carry on with having their depot shared with the school district buses. And so that has pushed them off. They have now purchased a piece of property out in Janelle, and not a bad thing per se when you think about driving in the highway from the different routes, even if you're coming from downtown where the school bus is. Timing wise, we're not missing too much downtime by being out in Janelle, and we're also able to facilitate some work with Castlegar as well. So there's sort of but that's one of those things that there was a request from the city to say, hey, if you're going in to tear up some of these islands and do these things because you're putting your money in, we would come together with you. They've made it very clear that right now they're not doing any of that type of work. So that's kind of come off our list as well. The street side light decorations, we got one more year to go. I think it's been pretty popular. We just need the snow next year maybe to make it kind of seem more seasonal. But we've got another year, and after that we should have updated all of our previous I guess decorations in the downtown. Yeah, it's been looking good. Intersection improvements at Second and Gopal. That was one we had talked, I think, in our second quarter update to council last year that didn't get, the engineering didn't get it out in time and didn't have success. That is in the process, and I believe General Manager Minor, am I correct that we're ready to kind of put in our RPO? Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, very close.
Very close. Okay. Yeah. So idea being that here we are. Oh, sorry.
No, I don't mean to interrupt. Just, could you maybe just give us an update as to what that would look like at that location and what's the plan?
Yes, I think, yes, and great questions as well, Councilor Cashflow. So we're kind of going through this, but I am hoping in my public budget presentation to have some of those photos or some of those things as well.
Okay, thank you.
But this is the one that we were talking about, having the island, and there's sort of making it a little easier for the individuals that are trying to cross there. I've talked about some sort of lighting. I don't know if you've sort of seen even what Nelson has, a bit more. You were not looking at some big overarching kind of things, but just safety kind of components to it. But that's sort of the idea.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yeah, great question. So yes, so that's getting ready to go over. We had talked about the carbon stair assessment, that we didn't have anyone in 2025 even provide any quotes. So as much as, certain areas we are seeing, as Mr. Bucking talked about, that I kind of surprised on the tree piece, that the same dollar amount that you would have that many people already. So maybe that tells us that money's shifting around, grants maybe aren't as prevalent, but we'll be curious to see. But we have sole source because we had no action. We have been talking with one engineering entity that does this type of work to talk to them to hopefully get that done this kind of year. Asset management, again, in yellow, $100,000. This is something that has drifted, I guess I would say. Especially in particular, I know that it's great to have a full complement of managers right now. That has not been the case over the last number of years. Having General Manager Minor come on, has been fantastic. He also went down and attended the asset management workshop down at the province, has come back with some thought process. We need to get some dollars. I cannot expect him to kind of off the side of his desk cobble this. So we are looking for sort of some seed money here. We have a lot of the information, but it is about trying to tie it together so that if you are looking at a block of the street, that you know that the street is in this type of condition. But also underneath it, you know, you've got pipes that are 100 years old, or maybe they're 50 years old. What other components that we need to make sure that we're making the best decisions for upgrading? And when I say that, meaning that one of the largest costs for doing a lot of this work is paving on top. So the last thing we want to be doing, I know that our staff are quite good at looking at, and we do have information on our roads, but if you're replacing that road, let's make sure that you update sewer, the water, and that sort of thing. So it's about time. General Manager Reiner, I know maybe put you on the spot, but you just had a slip of water. I just would be curious if you could maybe give council a bit of thought process on what you're thinking and how this will move out.
Yes, thanks through the chair. When I did attend that conference, late last year, I was fortunate enough to participate in a presentation where one particular municipality had actually used two different levels of support contractors, and their first step was a very logical first step, which is essentially creating what's called a risk registry. Documenting how you're going to document your assets. And from there, the municipality was able to go then internal, use their own individuals to start populating this registry. And then when it came time to try and learn how to manage and set up plans, then they reached out again to another contractor for the more end game portion of it, which is how now do I wrap this all up? How do I create visuals? How do I create plans? How do I create budgets and all that thing? So the critical phase for us is we're going from 0 to 100, and we're going to try and do it based on some solid footings, which will be that asset registry. So that is what we're hoping to kick off with.
And there will be more work to come from this, but it is about saying how to make data and that data, make it useful for us. You can see those are sort of the projects under transportation capital for 2026. Do you see some outer years here? Again, a lot of planning. There's some time on some of those. Last year was a very capital intensive. Some of these, the current year, I have said to staff, really important that we say what we're going to do, that we get it done. And it also means to be healthy on managing our staff, supporting our staff, and getting ready. So some of these as well, I think we'll take an opportunity to take a step back so that when we come in 2027, we're better lined up with what we expect the costs are going to be for capital into 27 and onwards. And here's one that didn't have a lot of love in the previous years, but is sort of coming up for our attention, is storm sewer. Part of that is bubbling, with the fact that we've had a number of pretty heavy rainstorms in the last couple of years, and we're seeing some places where, and we have had no knowledge of that either the storm piping is not sufficient enough. But again, you have to look at this holistically. It takes a lot of time for planning. So that's certainly one of the components in the 2026 year is the East Trail. We know that there's an area there that floods every time that we get that. So what is the plan? So looking at engineering, but you also notice that we don't have anything particular for next year because we don't actually know what's going to come out of that conversation. But this does get us some of the tools of if you're going to tackle this, what does it look like? What size of pipe do you need? Those sorts of questions. Dewdney, we also again had reported to council in 2025. You'll notice there's a 0 in 2025, but we have been in front saying, again, did not get in front of this in a timely fashion for getting it out for tender. That has been, we're way ahead of schedule, and since all of the planning work and engineering work is done, and I think that we're locked in, I think, with the, we are making sure that Silver City Days will operate as normal with this project, but But other than that, we're ready to roll on Dewdney Ave. And so this will be one that will be good because it is a synergy project. Not only are we doing stormwater and some of the improvements to the actual facility, there's also the water and the utilities, again, being funded through those while we have this road ripped up and take care of all that. Now, a couple of new ones that have popped up. One that council will slightly remember, I'm thinking from 2024, December, November, December, is that the Daniel Street storm, that's a place that needs some attention. It's just above us here. It's a very, very deep hole. Again, this is a synergy project that we're looking at in 2027. And this is the storm portion, but there's also water and utilities, and there's a bit of a historically old and not well designed sort of connections of pipes up there that we need to get in there, and it's so deep, and because it's so steep, it's going to take a lot of effort to fix that. So we want to do it and do it right. So that's something that we're looking at for 2027. And as Mayor Jones had noticed, you'll notice that under row 236 there, or 38, I should say, you'll see Community Works Fund pop up, and there's 364. And we'll look at that in the spreadsheet because we have historically right now been putting any of that Community Works Fund towards capital projects in water. But the fund is in a pretty good space that I think that this would be one that if we were trying to fund this portion of it, that we would use a chunk of that money to, ease off the pressure on the reserve fund and for our taxpayers. And again, Brian's transfer culvert, we're looking at some planning in 2027. We have a placeholder of 200,000 in 2028. Will that be sufficient? Again, we'll wait and see. So. And moving down there, retaining wall assessment. One of the things we had some money looking at the time for retaining wall Cedar Street, but the question kind of came in is that's in that space that we had with where, if council is aware, that is across from the Bailey Theater, sort of in that area. So right now, that's something that we're putting on hold for a couple of reasons. One is that we're not sure because there's some water pipes in there as well. And if we're going to go in and do some of this work, how would we tie that together? If we need additional water or connections as related to the properties on 900 Spokane and 901 Helena. So this is one that as the committee that's working on this and get some plans in the future. So we may have to come back and revisit this, but right now this has sort of been put on the side. In the same time, we are going to do, as we talked about in our strategic priorities, is the retaining walls assessment. So that's planned for 2026. Now this would be not just Cedar Street, but obviously getting a map of where we're at with our walls.
So you have Daniel Street on here, but is that showing that it's complete now or just until
So right now, again, you up inside the storm sewer?
the retaining wall? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, that would be.
247.
Yeah, that would have been left over from 2020.
Okay.
So I should
Okay.
have hidden that row. Oh, thank you for that. I'll check that and make that adjustment. Works yard, yeah, we had some really good success in 2025, and I know that we, for staff, it was really important. We added the wash bays. We did a number of pieces of work as far as some of the fuel tanks and some of the covered storage that we had. So that's very successful. You'll notice that the material storage bins, because they found that they were not going to be able to cover what they ended up doing in the yard improvements, they did not move forward with the material storage bins. So if you look, yes, we're over budget under row 267 for those work that we did, but we also didn't take on the storage bins, and so kind of balance that out. Another really positive thing is that you can see we were told that the carpenter's shop roof would be about $200,000. That was actually completed this winter, which is not. It's a bit unique to be having roof work done, but it doesn't tell you the summer that we had, and we got it done for about obviously $85,000 less than what we had anticipated. So that's one of those good news stories because we know there's other capital that needs to be undertaken. We've got a bit more work to do in yard improvements at Public Works. We are hoping to do the storage bins, and when we talk about the storage bins, so council's aware, it's delineating If we've got certain crush for doing work for the utilities that is required, if you're putting down a new pipe that has to have certain pieces, it's the breaking out of salt or sand and different products that we have out there. So having them delineated with these rock walls, so bins, certain things is very helpful and makes it a lot more efficient and clean for a very tight space that we have back there, Public Works, for all the projects that we do. So this has been very good value and is, I think, seen very well and improves morale with our staff as well. Oh, and then again, I don't know how many of you drop by and look, but we do have the new pipe racks that council approved in previous years. Those are now up and actually own piping. So I think having them out of the snow, this year wasn't as much an issue, but out of the snow usually, so that someone doesn't run over a nice big water pipe is valuable. And again, just more efficiency and visually very, very well received. So again, I'm not seeing a lot of requests in 2027 outwards. So I'm going to move on now to page 3 of this, which is fleet. And we had a very successful year, in my opinion, in just not only the procurement part of what we expected for the budget, being very close to what we expected to spend, some a little bit over, some a little bit under. Overall, I think very successful, particular, you can see why. Snow blower, brand new snow blower that everyone was excited about getting, and then never got turned over once. So again, really successful here on the equipment that we purchased, and a big year of improvements for vehicles, which again, having the staff members that have been on a riding lawnmower that beats them up so badly, to have something that has shocks that work and seats that work ergonomically. We've seen an improvement in our staff enjoyment and usage of the equipment, so that's been very successful. For 2026, we already have the tandem hook truck is already in order. And when we talk about hook trucks, one of these things that is not focusing on an asset that only does a dump truck. So you have a hook on it, so you want to put the dump truck in because you're going to a utilities job and you want to have big amounts of snow or material be put into it. Yes, you can do that, but hey, wait a second, that can now be put aside and you can put a flat deck on. We want to, so you get sort of multiple pieces of equipment when you kind of go the hook truck way. So that is in order. And then some of the other just normal pickup trucks replacement that we have on our schedule, and you can see that we've got that sort of planned out for the next number of years. Again, we'll see the equipment reserve. We're in pretty good space. And so I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. I thought 2025 was very successful in upgrading a lot of equipment that we had, so, and well received by staff as well.
So, in 2026.
Yes.
Are we looking at electric trucks or we're just going with regular, half-ton pickups?
Well, I mean, again, one of those things that's sort of interesting, as council was aware, last year we used the government funding to buy the electric trucks, and all of a sudden they don't make them anymore, which is always kind of one of those negative experiences of government mandates and then giving you money to buy things like electric trucks, and then all of a sudden people were saying, we're not selling it, there's no value in this, and again, hybrids and things like that. But those are certainly the kind of questions that we talk about. I think that you'll notice that the electricians half ton with a hybrid pickup is everybody. So yes, when we look at it where it's appropriate, we do look into those sorts of things. But it's a bit sometimes frustrating. You'd hate to think that we've got these brand new F-150s and they don't make them anymore. Where does that go? Right, so. Anyway, but hopefully that answers your questions. That is something that we look at. There are certain pieces of equipment like the wheel loader. We don't have the ability to have that. And again, when you look at this, that was part of the fleet master plan as well, as to look at what are we doing. A lot of things have changed in the last number of years here, where there was mandates. Now the mandate seems to be on pause, and in fact, likely going to be removed. You're seeing places like Ford taking $17 billion write-downs on their EV vehicles and things like that, right? So it's a interesting time, especially when gas, oil prices were going down, but that's changed in a hurry in the past month. So we're very curious to see what the world looks like in the next little while. But these are all things that we take into consideration. And yes, if we find something that will work with what we're needing, that we do look at that. Okay, PMC, very successful year in that, we very close to budget there on our Cominco Arena and board replacement, and looks fantastic. And, I think the community, is pleased to see, the results of that work. And I also note that we had BC Winter Games. We just finished the U18, boys provincials, U18, girls provincials. We got AQBLG coming in, but we're going to have summer ice. There's already, people asking about, kind of signing up for that. And so much so that they've even booked the ice when you could have had some Silver City days in that. And so unfortunately won't be able to because people who rented the ice and we can't take that space on. So anyway, maybe that's a next year thing. Maybe Silver City days wants to book that. We don't know, but right now it won't be.
This will be resolved.
Well, yes. Good point. In the playoffs, they're gonna go all. Yes. Some of the other components that we had in there, the TMC HVAC recovery project we talked about. It's really close, but the heat recovery units that are here are not in place. So we've done a lot of work. We've run into a couple of challenges there. You'll see that for what we budgeted in 2025, that we got about 560 left over, but we need some additional funding. So we've had some change orders. We found that back in the day when they were building a building like that running piping through stairwells and things like that, it's not appropriate today. So when you go in and upgrade ammonia plants and piping and those sorts of things, you have to take on making it so it's up to code today. So we've had a bit of pressure on that. But again, we did get a significant grant as well, which helped make this project successful. We know that we're seeing or expecting here as well that to be able to now monitor once those HVAC units are in place, and the heat savings and utility savings for the TMC should help assist as well. A number of asks in here, they're kind of ongoing. It's such a big building. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. We knew that we had the conference IT got carried forward into 2026 here, because you're trying to make sure that if we've got same company that's doing a number of our IT projects, that we would have one demo kind of cost. So that's very positive, and really getting prepared, wanting to make sure that it's in place. So we will for AQBLG. So we'll have that AV equipment all up in the Victoria View Room, which again will, I believe, make it more popular for people to rent it out. It's a lovely space now with the acoustics and very clean. So and now with the AV system upgraded, I think that we're going to see more rentals into that location. One item that's a bit new and a bit concerning in some aspects is under line 347. We need a new Zamboni. Yeah. So Zamboni we have, in fact, you'll notice there's back-to-back Zambonis. We do not want to have summer ice and or go into next season. The unit that we have is, and one of them is end of life, the other one is okay, but not the best piece of equipment. So again, we're trying to figure that out. Meantime, we want to get our order in. It's like any other piece of equipment these days. You're looking outwards. So the Zamboni is one that there's a request here for that. It's in the capital plan. So, Councillor Hanson.
Sorry,
No.
the Zamboni question.
Yes.
Is there, through the chair, sorry, is there an opportunity to have some storage for the Zamboni so it's closer, so it doesn't have to go inside, outside so much and deter like the kids rink ice? Cause that's, I think, a big thing is that ice getting in and out of there
Yeah.
is still getting thrashed coming in and out of that corner.
Yeah.
Is there any way to
We have,
alleviate any of that?
yeah, we've talked about it. We've talked about a few things, and part of that is, I think, expectation change. It is culture change. There seems to be the need to have two Zambonis on for Smoke Eaters games. Some of that has to do with entertainment kind of pieces and doing that. So this is where you run into some of these challenges that, in theory, you probably don't. Or do we need some of these things? What we do know right now is that we need one at least, but those are sorts of questions that we talked about. The pressure that came was because you would recall we had some ideas of getting the storage place for the Zamboni and the kids rink. they're talking about scheduling as well. Apparently, if we have a bit more of a gap on scheduling, then we can actually use the units and do different things. So there's some work to be done there. So that's where I see the facility maintenance manager saying, I do need one this year, but some of those questions that you're asking, those are all the questions I think that will come through for 2027. And I think that they're fair and good questions to ask. And I don't have an answer for you today, but people are looking at exactly what you're asking about and saying, how is it the best way that we can provide good ice, obviously, but be efficient because they're not inexpensive. How do we create a space? Point that they were like, we're willing to give up though, like the fact that because this is a new kind of ask for the Zamboni, because they haven't seen it before. There was some money put aside for building some storage space for the Zamboni, but they were like, it's better that we actually get a Zamboni than having the storage. So it is part of the thing, but it kind of got ripped or pulled out of the budget because we need the Zamboni. But these,
We need the machine instead of the storage for the machine.
exactly, but it is something that I would expect for 2027 onwards, that we need a plan. And there is some conversations about if we're better at how we're doing this, how can we do with one, or do we have the older machine be in a place where it's under storage that maybe you don't need to replace the second one? There's a number of issues there that staff are looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Benson, to the chair. Very trail, the longest talk we have is gonna be about the Zamboni. When you say that depending on the schedule, it can do other things, what else can a Zamboni do?
What I'm saying is, I apologize, I didn't mean it that way.
Oh.
But we have
Cut the
two,
lawn or?
no, no, we have two, because sometimes we're very tight. So if you're.
What you mean, like, in terms of ice scheduling?
Yes,
Okay.
right, so yes, I apologize, yes, forgive me. But if you're saying like, hey, we've got the kids rink and it needs to be cleared at this time, but if the gap was on the scheduling, that maybe you're 15 minutes off or half an hour off,
Okay,
then maybe you only need one unit.
Right.
That could do this ice and then go over and do that ice, and then you don't have some of those costs. So these are some of the things that
Thank
staff
you.
are looking at. Yes, I apologize. Yes, there's no other purpose. We're not going to create anything in the parking lot or, any kind of.
Turn into a sweet sweeper.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I apologize. Yes, I should have been there.
Parade vehicle. There's your Silver City base. Float.
Yes, exactly. A couple other components here that I think is important. One is that we've got some a transformer in the curling rink, and we need to figure about how to replace that. That's not really an ideal place. So we've got some money in here for looking at how we deal with that as a situation. The other one you'll notice in here is about 20,000 for the Kaminko gym ceiling. More again, some investigation on because there's a real thought that we could so part of this again is analyzing it. It's something we believe with some investment could really drive additional usage of it. And so the facilities manager has also been in touch with like, hey, the floor is at a place where it's kind of end of life. So what does that look like? But if you were able to have the roof higher, then you could have soccer, you can have volleyball, you have these a number of things, and we can take, there would be a real benefit to using the field house less, because then we always have to send people over to the field house. But if you're having the activities that we're doing in the field house, so we can do more of them obviously and schedule them at the TMC, you've already got the staff there. So again, it's one of those pieces that we've talked about. Let's figure out a plan. The council's willing to invest in this, and we want to see like, well, the upside is that we would get this much more in revenue and better usage of the TMC. So, but that's sort of a starting point right now, some money to do some investigations on that ceiling, understanding what's up there. Tend to find, much like in some of these other locations, that you go to open up ceiling tiles and different things, you kind of go, okay, we'll put the ceiling tiles back down and move on. So that's a good question, but these are, what I've really appreciated with staff is that looking at where can we spend our capital money in an investment way that creates additional revenue from being entrepreneurial and using the facilities more widely and bringing in revenue. The talc, we have a number of requests there. Had the building assessment, we know that we've got some challenges. We're like, when you have that information, then it's time to sit down again and say, okay, what is it that we need to do? We did have obviously a breakdown last year with some of the heating exchange plates, as council is fully aware. The upside of that is that in doing through that work, we did find that we found a vendor that would sell us basically at wholesale price instead of before when we were buying it through the full price. And in fact, the wholesale price was so much less, it allowed us to invest in getting some additional backup in case anything happened again, but it also allows us to really, again, learning from the fact that we don't need to go through someone that's already marked, bought it from the wholesaler, marked it up and then selling it to us. Now we're finding that we can buy direct. So there's some positives that came out of that pump. But on top of that, there's a number of capital things that we need to do with the talc. I think that everyone is aware of that. One is the ventilation. I think that, General Manager Miner said that when you walk into a pool, if you smell that chlorine, that tells you that you're not venting in the way that you should. So we've got some work to do on some of that. But these are the funds that we've got in there. That's a fair ask for 2026, knowing that we've got some other bigger costs kind of going out into the outer years there. But and I don't know if you have any questions of specifics on what that is. I know that General Manager Miner would have a bit more knowledge on the details of some of those requests if you were interested. Or you could just trust it with,
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
Through the chair, climbing wall feature,
yes.
tell me more.
Well, that was one of the ones that Gabby had brought forward, Manager Kowalski.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've seen it, it's like a big ice cube and you can climb up it and then you can slide down it sort of thing.
Oh,
And so for those opportunities when we have the kids' nights and those sorts of things, so they can block off the pool, it's in the deep end, we can tie it off, get the, it just makes one more activity for the kids to kind of
Yeah,
enjoy
great.
the time at the aquatic center.
very neat, thank you.
Okay, 2026, tree assessment, we got that particular work done, which was great, but of course came out of it is that you have a whole bunch of work you need to get done, and we'll see the answer to that lower down. We also note that the Bride Street Park Playground, when we put the ask in, got the results back, again, it was higher than what was budgeted, so we were able to work with the vendor, which was great, and got them to hold their price. I think that that's maybe gonna get installed here in the next little while. Am I correct on that, General Manager? Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, to share the materials already on site.
Okay,
And I believe we're preparing in the next month or so here. A lot of activities that were scheduled for later in the spring have been reevaluated to current timeline for spring, so we'll see what's available.
okay, thank you. I'm trying to see here, so if you look at Gillespie Park 411, I'm hoping that council will remember that we sort of took the money under the Butler Park above it. And so we used it, we ended up spending more, but the part for me that on this number that isn't quite complete, and even for 2026, this is sort of the city's contribution for this. What's missing right now is the hundreds of thousands of donated amounts, so I wanted to get that information, so we've been asking for them. There's also some additional donations, work gonna be happening in 2026 as well, so we wanna have that number in there, and the CBT has been gracious to help fund some of those work that the Little League is doing. So that'll be an area that we'll get a little bit of an update once I get some numbers. But if anyone's been up to visit and see what's happening there, if you were wondering, again, for me, it's fantastic what has happened already. We're so far ahead. If someone was looking at the previous year's 5-year capital, you would have noticed we had a bunch of money sitting out in 2027 to get prepared for nationals the following year. But they've got so much work done that we'll get everything done in 2026 for those fields, for not only the provincials, but also for the nationals. So, really a shout out to Shred Little League and Marnie, who's the lead on that. She has been unbelievable in pulling together, which we will have 2 beautiful kids fields up there. So that's going to be fantastic. But those numbers too, I just need to update. I think it's important to show the community, not only as a city contributing, but we've had very big in-kind donations from our community as well on that particular project. Irrigation upgrades, the high risk tree mitigation, so 414, you can see that we got about 250K over the next 3 years. And that relates to the fact that we had the tree assessment done. So then they said, hey, you've got a whole bunch of trees that you need to cut down. So good to do the assessment, but it does allow us to focus on the priority ones and also defensible in the sense of, yes, we are going to tackle the most dangerous ones first. That's very much in line with MIA. You get a report, you've got funding, you can't know that you can't do all of it. You've got it in a plan, you start working on the highest priorities, that protects us as well in case a tree that maybe ends up getting scheduled in year 2 comes down early. It was your plan and that you had something that you were trying to mitigate the risk. We're gonna put in. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Is there anything through the chair, is there any funding for, as we're taking some of these trees down? I may be presumptuous in assuming they may be in areas that could be fire smarted where some of these are going down. Is there any funding available for fire smarting when we're doing these tree mitigations? Because as we go into summer.
Yep.
Right, the risks are there. So if we're already in an area, is there an opportunity to do some fire smarting as well, if there's funding available?
Yeah, the focus has been through the emergency management service that we're in at RDKB that has done a lot of that work. They tend to look at other places to spend the money, and they've got some pretty high risk areas, ones in particular about the hospital and that sort of thing. So that's where they've sort of focused on. Doesn't mean that we can't, but that has been their focus on areas that and large sections of fire mitigation. So for me, that's their sort of expertise on being able to get the grant money, get it in front of those and make the decisions and do that. They've helped us on a few different things, like last year when they tied in with the work that we did around the water treatment plant, right? So we did have some of those successes. Right now, one of the big ones obviously is around the hospital and a bunch of different trees to be mitigated or a plan that's going on. I did notice today when we were on Community Safety Task Force that Chief Derby did mention that, like in many other areas, are sort of quiet, that the application is in, not 100% sure where we are. Some of that funding has been pulled back. So, but again, we do talk about those. I'm not 100% sure on where we would go, what we would, I guess, sort of working with our emergency management group to kind of get the highest priority areas for the community, but that's how we operated on that.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're gonna put in a basketball hoop. So I don't know.
Know a bunch of kids will be happy about that.
So yeah, so that's, I think, a very exciting thing, great for the community. So that's just one, if you're wondering about that, did come up. We also, if I'm correct, we are in a place that the skywalk needs to have an inspection about either side of the bridge and I guess where those huge bolts and those sorts of things, and look at all that inspection from the shore to see that everything's copacetic with that particular bridge. So we have some money put in for that. Glen Mary Green Space, I know the council, I think, was out for a bit of a tour, so we've got some funding there to get started on a plan. Based on that plan, we kind of estimated what it might cost for doing just small amounts of irrigation and different things. It's an expensive component there. 2027. We do note that the school district isn't wanting us to use their water, so we have to get water to the site. So that also makes it very challenging overall. So hopefully that's a high level. We did have a plan of 15 million. We spent 10 million. There's a couple of items, big numbers, like for example, the daycare for $1 million didn't get done. We're a bit behind, obviously, on the TMC project. Some of those other Second and Gopal, the work at Doomy. So when you look at the numbers, there's some of those bigger projects that didn't move forward, but a very successful year. We are seeing in 2026, especially with the Cominco Arena being completed, so both of those rinks now having brand new ice surfaces and boards. Yes, there's always touches inside a building that's old, but we've really upgraded that facility. Much a bigger drop in the current year, and even out of that 2.8, we have 2.5 of that, or sorry, so the 9.9, basically 10 million, but almost 25% of that is related to the daycare, which is fully grant funded. So again, we're I think trying to be successful with our staff and our managers. We took on a lot last year to be more strategic and healthy, I think, in trying to get the capital work that we need to get done. So I don't know if what I was hoping to do is, take any questions, but then maybe kind of go through the funding sources so that and then we can maybe take a break for a bit before we talk about
Go ahead, Councillor Cassel.
Just through the chair, thank you. The Violin Lake restoration
Yes.
for $250,000, what does that involve?
So, now council would have inherited, the decommissioning of the dam up there. So when we were up there, we had gone for the tour. And you would have remembered that this looked like basically a marsh. Didn't really kind of show you the before and after pictures, but maybe you've been here long enough, you knew that there was a big dam there and that there was a wall and then all that was full of water. So the city back in that day got a huge grant to decommission that, so get the bulldozers and excavators up there, take down that wall, reforest that whole area so that it wouldn't just rush the water and would create that resetting it or rewilding it, I guess. So that was the major part. One of the things that's always a bit striking, but even for myself, when I think about things, is that was those 2 years. But then in year 5, we had to have a final sort of project check. So this is a much smaller amount, but we don't have any grant funding for it. So this is something the city has to do to then wrap up the project. And again, I don't know if we would have maybe in your early days, maybe hear about, yes, we finished this, we've got the work done, we've got the, the trees going, but there is an expectation as part of the grant that you go back and say, yes, do we need some more trees here, or is there some more shaping over there? Has it provided the results that we wanted? Are there the birds and the amphibians? And this was all part of the actual grant itself, like the grant project.
So we are legally bound to spend that kind of money to finish the project?
Well, to do a report on it, yes, I've asked the similar questions and General Manager Miners got his hand up because we're asking some of those questions as well, but.
Yeah, thanks for the chair. This final year inspection is essentially to wrap up the 2 major authorizations, both provincial and federally, to do this work. So our Fisheries Act authorization and our Water Sustainability Act authorization. So we have to demonstrate that the reclamation of that area is successful to be able to close those, and then that gets closed on the end for the Department of Fisheries.
And that just a further question to the chair. So the $250,000 is for the assessment, is for
Yes, biologists and on-site work, yes, sitting there counting birds and turtles.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but what is our return on that? Like,
well, I
we
think,
don't use the lake,
No,
so we don't get revenue from the lake.
I think it was maybe the tie-in of the multi-million-dollar grant to remove the site. And so when we had it before, then you would have had those staff up there maintaining it, watching it. Especially from the poly mine. I don't know if you that one that let go. So there's huge requirements in which would cost a lot of money, engineering alls annually on the dam and that sort of thing. So that was why it was a good news story that you've got such a huge grant to take care of the 98% of the cost of the project. I too have questioned this and staff are aware, and we're trying to find out how much of a report do you need to get the thing finalized. What we did get was the original person, this is their quote on doing the final report. And I don't know if we're paying for a Cadillac when we need a
Cavalier.
Yes, so, but those are the questions that Mark, but this is where we're at right now as far as what we've been told. And this, again, this would be in respecting what the requirements were of the grant that we would be responsible for this side.
Okay,
I also asked for my eyebrows on that as well.
thank you.
Councillor Hudson, go ahead.
Thank you, Ed. Further to this question, is there an opportunity, I was just thinking along the lines of the trail health and environment, because I know that the Ecosystem Society, that they also tech has to do so much land mitigation and whatnot. Is there any opportunity, I guess, to work with anything part of the board type? Well, they have to have so much.
You don't have an answer on you. I think at the time, city council have been ecstatic that they would get that much money to deal with a dam that wasn't being used for such a long period of time.
Yeah.
This is sometimes one of those remnant kind of components, and I had much like the questions that are being asked here. I have the same questions. I have a number right now from the person that did the project. It says this is what we'll do to wrap up the report for you. I'm trying to find if we can find a way to do that for less. But that means and again, it's about hiring biologists that need to be able to sign off on the documents and say, yes, you've done this accurately. Yes, the flow of the water is so many, whatever and whatnot. So, I am not fully aware of anything with THC on that one. And the fact that we brought in all new fill or shaped it, I think it, I'm not sure.
I didn't think it was that expensive.
Well, I mean, again, and when you get consultants and those sorts of things, I hear you, right? And so, but I also was saying, hey. If I go up there and go, like, it looks pretty good to me, and I could sign off on the report and give me $500, that's sort of what I was hoping for, but apparently that's not.
Get a stamp.
Exactly, that's not, don't have the stamp, I don't have the qualifications and so. Working on it.
Nice.
So, just wanted to, again, don't know if you, get a lot of capital going on, but a lower when I think about even where we were last year, especially when you kind of take out what I see as the daycare component. And the other part for me that's is key is that we already know that Dewey and Second Local, some of these bigger projects that we have, we're in a place where we're out or we've got a contract in place so that, you know, we should be coming back to you saying, hey, this isn't happening kind of thing. So yeah, should be able to tie in a really good, successful year for 2026 for this council and part of your term. I'm going to move now just onto some of these. There's 4 pages that are the equipment replacement reserve, the capital projects reserve, community works fund, and then the bridge reserve. And so on page 1 there for me is the equipment replacement reserve. You could see that our opening balance was quite high. We knew that going in, but we had almost almost $1 million worth of budgeted for capital purchases. We ended up doing better, getting better prices on some of the equipment, so we ended up at $840. We did have some LGAP funding as well, so that helped us. And kind of carrying forward, even though on these numbers that the closing balance, you'll notice that the reserve allocation from operating is higher than the budgeted $350. One of the reasons for that is the fact that we were able to trade in or sell some surplus equipment, and really that's money is sort of part of the process of going back into the reserve to help fund more equipment. So when I look at where we're at on the 350, the schedule that's going on, yeah, we're going down as we get out to 2030. So those are some of those questions that we'll talk about. I did also in my general say that we are looking right now at a bit of a surplus, so those are sorts of things like at the end of the current year, if you're like, hey, let's add an extra 50,000 or extra amount of thousand, you could see where that would help. It takes some pressure off for this reserve on the equipment and that sort of thing. So I'm feeling confident right now with the amount of equipment that we're purchasing that we're in a pretty healthy spot on the equipment reserve. Again, not seeing any questions. We're going to move to the capital projects reserve. So if you went through the different titles, that's where you would kind of see where I get the budget numbers for, here's the capital cost down at the bottom there, which is under capital expenditures, when there's under IT, city buildings, protective services, etc. And those numbers from the budget you would be able to pull from the 5-year capital that we just gone through, all that detailed lines. Here's it sort of rolled up under the different categories. Now, this would be for all of the capital costs except for cemetery, because it gets funded separately, and also for the equipment reserve because it's also funded separately. So if you're saying, hey, wait a second, the 892 is not the same as the 989, that's the reason why. We have again a commitment to opening balances in a pretty healthy spot. We've got the allocation coming in for the current year. We have some grant funding, obviously a big chunk of that, at least 2.5 of that is the provincial grant from daycare. And so this sort of shows you here that as well, but we're not in a bad spot overall as you look at the money coming in, the amount of capital expenses that we have. However, I'm also not convinced that when we get some of these reports back in the same way we did the tree assessment, that we said, oh, let's invest in the tree assessment, and then it's like, oh, you gotta spend an extra $250,000. So as we do some of the planning in 2026, I expect that there's some pressure will come, but what I thought was important is that with council's commitment to providing money to this particular capital reserve and increasing it by about 100,000 each year, offsetting with interest income that we can earn, some of the grants that we've been successful at doing. We're in a pretty good spot, but all it takes is one big thing to sort of land in our lap, and that'll put some pressure on us. And as we go through the next number of years, we are starting to see some debt come off, but there is also some rather large debt payments we have both for the Skywalk and Riverfront Center, and so they're gonna be, long-term kind of debt payments that are going. And there's nothing wrong with if we did end up with doing something or something came along that needed additional funds that would drain this out. Those are the sorts of conversations you have with council to say, hey, this update to this, or we need to do this, and we need to fund it over 20 years. That's where you would say, hey, let's borrow some money. We know that this is a benefit to the community. That's a way of funding it, and not always just relying on the taxation funds that we pull in and then allocate to the capitals. I'm gonna move on now to page 3, which is the Community Works Fund. And again, you can see for 2025, we knew that we were going to get funding, but we weren't going to spend any funding. Because we were building it up for 2026, we were gonna double the payment that we received. And that's to help with the Charles Lake Capital Reserve, which is quite an expensive project. And then ongoing, you can see that in the same way that the transfer semi-annual grant that's coming in and the transfer out of the semi-annual grant each year, the 441 going into the water utility. This was an area when I looked at it and said, well, we're sitting up at 1.2-ish million. This is an area that shouldn't just always be for water. If we've got pressure on our capital reserve and things like stormwater, which is definitely a appropriate and allowable use of community works funding, that 364 in 2027 allows you to tie in with some of the sewer project and water project to fund a rather large $1 million project, and doesn't really, as you can see in the years out for 2027, 28, 29, that you're still sticking with $1 million, even after doing that in 2027. And again, council will have the approval stage when we get to 2027 onwards, but there's also a little bit of funds in here in case we did run into something. If we needed a little bit of help in the capital fund, this is an area that, again, isn't meant for every capital project we have, but certainly can be used for assisting the capital works reserve if we were trying to figure out, where we're at funding this. Okay, and then the bridge reserve. So I think this is another thing that council should be very proud of, I guess, because when we first started, we didn't have anything. And since then, we have been allocating some. In 2025, we did lower the reserve from operating. You can see that at the end of the current year, even at the 50,000, we now have almost $600,000 in this reserve, almost nothing from the start of the term. And I think that as the number starts to get bigger, you can start to see where interest income almost starts to almost be self-fulfilling, that might be you get enough money in there and it just starts to continue to fund itself. And maybe you could take some pressure off of the taxation that we put towards it. And I did put in my notes to you that we had talked about this last year to try to balance in 2025, that we lowered the 100,000 we've been putting in and put into 50. And we said, hey, we would look at what that looks like in 2020 at the end of the year. And this would be a year that you might want to say, yeah, we could put this amount in. You might even say, let's put in a bit more in the current year because we have it, and take some pressure off of 2026 or 2027. So those are some of those conversations that I think allows council to have some flexibility, help themselves with the cost pressures of budget as well for 2026 and onwards. But at some point in time, this isn't forever kind of, and we call it the bridge reserve. So I never, on that, I don't know if or ever that you're going to get demanded to kind of take it down, but it is nice to know that you've got some funding aside so that if you are able to negotiate with the province and the feds, if you're getting a grant to be able to take down the thing, or if the cost of steel goes up so high that maybe some comes along and makes some money as well. So that's sort of the capital component. Like I said, a few small tweaks to come on items like Whiskey Park, but overall, Phil, staff have done well on, let's say, if we're going to say we're going to do it, let's make sure that we do it.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to follow up on one last piece here. If I could. And then we'll let council take a stretch of their legs and we'll tackle operating. So one thing I wanted to, and Councillor Cashel alluded to this. So we each year have to report out to the province what we've done with the COVID funding. Most people don't have either used it all up and so the yeah, so the COVID restart funding, we had $565,000 available at the end of 2024. And we used, council agreed to provide 135,000 or sorry, 200,000 in 2025 for succession planning and for some IT projects. We spent $75,000 of that. So if you subtract out the 565, you're at 490. And then if you take out the 490 and take out the 220, plus I'm also asking for some additional funding the current year for about 150. So even at the end of the current year, on the request that I'm saying, you would still have COVID funding remaining of about $120,000. So again, we're not completely depleting that, and we are using it on areas that would qualify for under the province's rights. The other thing that I think is important is that there's a couple other funding sources that we have available. We had $3.2 million in the Growing Communities grant, and we used a big chunk of that on demolishing the 2 901 Spokane and 900 Spokane and 901 Helena. And so the remaining part of that growth fund, so we on the sheet here. So out of the last year, we were expecting that we might use a huge chunk of it. We did use a big chunk of it, but we used 2.6 million of it. So we actually have about close to I'm going to say we're close to $600,000 remaining. And right now, just speaking for council, I think that this could be some funding that would be available to council. I haven't put it in anywhere, it's available, but I would suggest that this will be something that as the community, the downtown community does their work, that this would be an area of growth, that this would be some seed money towards doing some things that would qualify for that. So again, letting you know, we did use a big chunk of the money on 900 Spokane, 901 Helena. We also used a bit of it on the kids rink to take pressure off of our capital works reserve, but about $600,000 would be available. And I'm thinking that could be, I haven't put it for anywhere, but that's just a number I want council to be aware of, so that as we get into the current year and they want to do something, whether that ends up being 2027 or even in the current year, we're always allowed to make a budget amendment, as I think council's aware that if something comes along, but we do have some funding sitting there under that particular fund as well. And the other one I think is important because we did talk about land sale reserve, and its balance at the end of 2024 was $723,000. We didn't use any of it in the current year, so we will have some additional interest income earned on it. So I'm thinking it's going to probably sit in the $750,000 range. And currently, right now, under this plan, we have earmarked taking $200,000 of that. So there's still a significant balance in that particular fund as well, and which also could be tapped into for, again, if you were taking growth fund in this fund, if it creates sort of that seed money that if you were trying to, what contribution would the city make towards trying to get some development down there? These are some funding sources that I think would be important for council to be aware of. So I'm glad that you stuck with me on that. It's not always easy. but I'd be happy to take any questions, and if not, I think it might be wise for us to have like a bit of a bio break and a brain break. Any questions from anyone on that?
Okay, great to go.
Yeah.
That was quick.
Very efficient.
Relatively, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna tackle operating budget today. We talked, or this afternoon here, we talked a bit about capital. In the past, we've kind of talked more about RDKB and just sort of some of the things, challenges that we were seeing. So then for today, kind of make sure we're gonna talk about the 2026-2030 financial plan. Province mandates that we have a 5-year financial plan. I know council have seen the quick facts. I'm not gonna go through that very quickly. I have a number of questions on that 2026 budget overview. And we'll go through some of the slides there. In particular, I've added some slides in regards to major industry and what that looks like. So please, if you've got questions, I would ask that you would put your hand up or get my attention. So again, part of this for today is to talk about and sort of debate and get a proposed tax rate. That's one of the pieces on this. Staff have done their work. That's where we're at for the different tasks that are in the department. For the most parts, we've been doing a lot of shaping. When I say that, meaning, we had some succession planning. We had, two basically corporate officers for part of the year, and so now we're down to one. We've got our managers all in place, like I said, which I think is really valuable for the city. We've got our planner, and I think we're really seeing the benefits of having that planner and just that expertise when he brings in and talks about development permits and the direction that we're going. So I'm very pleased with the result of that, and I'm very pleased with the staff that we've been able to bring in from the union, staff that we've brought in from the outside, and how cohesive they have been working with the staff that were already here doing a great job. We're a very strong team, and I would say to you, when I look out, pretty young team as far as I'm the one that's the oldest, I would say, as far as that goes, which isn't necessarily uncommon, but to have a really good, strong group of individuals that live in the community, have their families in the community, want to stay in the community, very valuable, especially just in conversations I've had with a couple of our neighboring municipalities that have lost key members in the last. Well, it doesn't mean that we don't lose somebody. I'm saying to you that seeing a number of places where people have either left or retired, and just it really does put a lot of stress on staffing, and it's still not easy to get individuals with the certain expertise that you need for these roles. Again, we've talked about this, where the audit will be underway next week, so hopefully maybe I can upload some of these numbers, and the next time you see the quick facts, the 2025 numbers. We've talked about the fact that, yes, the revenue is over what the operational expenses are, but the reasons for that is because they do pay off debt, and they also flow out to the significant 3 point some odd million dollars as an example that we put into the capital reserve each year. One of the benefits for the city here is that your taxation is helping fund at a significantly higher level than other communities. You're 1.4 to 1 ratio. A lot of other places are in 2 plus, which means that if you have like a 1% inflationary increase in your operating expenses, for most cases, the only tool you have is to increase your taxation by 2%. So being at 1.4 is on the lower end of having almost a 1-to-1 ratio. I can see our employees and then kind of how much taxation is brought in by a 1% tax increase. The 2025 general fund results, for the most part, sales or service and other revenues were basically right in line. We were a little bit under in some areas, for example, in some of the water classes in the pool, memberships and attendance not as high, but we knew that we had a pretty big closure there for a while when we dealt with some repairs that kind of had sprung out of the work that we did as far as the shut off. The one part that is a bit perplexing for myself and for some of the staff is that we ended up getting this huge amount of building permit revenue, and it makes sense in some aspects, but we can't seem to get the reasoning why. And when we did our January 12th, I guess, council meeting, we had that final 12-month report from the RDKB, and it said that we had about $65,000 or $68,000 in building permit revenue. And so again, we're relying on them doing the numbers, doing the calculations for the building, and so we got that. And that was in line with what we had budgeted, so we were feeling comfortable with that. Shortly thereafter, we ended up getting a new report that said that we were at $212,000. And that was great news, and it had to do with the fact that the major project that's happening up at the hospital. So that was kind of that piece. Then we ended up getting an actual check or a payment and a new number at $360,000. So we've again asked, or Chris has asked, okay, can we get the backup for this number? So in some ways, it's a big contributor to why we are significantly higher, or we have a surplus this year. One of the main factors of this, over 33% of that, is this particular additional revenue received. Now, good news story, but I'm also, need to have the backup, be able to show the auditors that this is the actual number, and then I don't get a call in 2 weeks and say, hey, by the way, this number is not as accurate as we thought it was. So that's just one of those surprising pieces. Unlike last year, which again was my focus, another entity, is that we did have some understaffing, which ended up being salary savings, much like it was in 2024. Except that this time, the overtime costs were right in line with where they had previously been. So I didn't really necessarily get the full answers on some of these, although we've shared the documents that we did receive about overtime and kind of where it came from, and so that's one of those ones that's a bit of a mystery for us, and we try to do the best that we can with the information that we get. That hey, staff sergeant saying we're expecting to have this, a full complement, and then you don't, and then that's one of those ones that's a bit wary. I've had, for me, a suggestion, because it also is a large part of the reason that we have a surplus is because of RCMP, but I'm thinking that this might be a year that we look at setting up a reserve for the RCMP in case there was, a bigger issue here, or we did have a big year of overtime that, like last year where we ended up being $175,000 over budget, that would not kind of impact our taxpayers, and that you would sort of have some funding set aside. It would also help for some capital requests and those sorts of things. So anyway, that's kind of bleeding into next slide, but I just wanted you to be aware of kind of here's the areas, because otherwise we are pretty much in line with expectations on most of the other operations and with the revenues we've had. So good news story that our budgeting is I think it's accurate, I guess is the best way I could say it. So trying to explain the bigger reasons why. Again, the consecutive lower snow year, and I don't know if you will look at it, but I just saw the chart of it's always these bit of an unknowns, and especially because the winter for the year starts on January 1st, but doesn't end until December 31st. So you might have a really nice first 3 months of winter, and you get a really bad couple months at the end of it. But we'll look at that slide in a sense. But it does, we've talked about this at length, and it's a quarterly updates, that the fact that we underspend in public works, especially under a low snow year, we still keep the employees going. Yes, we save on sand and salt. Yes, we save on equipment charges and the trucks and gasoline and those sorts of things. But we keep the employees employed, and we do good work in our parks, which I know that we're way ahead of schedule as far as parks in 2026. We Bank of Canada didn't start off on their decrease in the interest rates as in the schedule that we had kind of expected they were. And so that also assisted in us having a little bit higher investment income than we had, which is always great. Airport expenditures, and we've talked about this before on the fuel and the sales revenue. So that's sort of this sales revenue is up, but then there's an expectation that your fuel costs will be up as well. Kind of having the profit margin is where you will be looking at making the benefit of it. Great news, as we heard today from our airport manager, that the numbers are up over previous years. We have the larger plane continuing to come in. That's only good news for us. But at the same time, is that when you're using that larger aircraft, they're built so that they can fly here and back and fuel under their own location, in which obviously is likely a savings for them because they're not paying the markup that we pay for fuel. But it does sort of cost some revenues and expenditures for being lower in the airport 2025. Here's just that slide. I don't know if everyone remembers 2022. That was an unbelievable, just after New Year's, it dumped an incredible amount of snow. And that's why you're seeing that huge spike. But even 2021 and 24 and 23, we're still usually that 500,000 number for doing snow clearing. You can see 2025, we're significantly lower than those. And I would say to you that depending on what happens in November, December 2026 could potentially be even less. Some of the proposed options for the 2025 general fund projected surplus options. Again, we're not done the audit. We still got some things to do. We need to confirm that the number that we got for building permit revenue is accurate, and that someone can show me that we can feel free that at auditors that we can keep that money and that I'm not having to send some money back. But in the meantime, I've suggested here that we may look at a reserve fund for the RCMP. And I think that would be something that would make sense. A lot of other communities do it just to smooth. If you've got areas or times when you get overages and hundreds to be able to, it doesn't have to all go in there, but I'm just saying to you, it allows you to protect yourself in case you did have a major crime here. When you have a major crime and they bring the unit in from Kelowna and whatnot, those costs can get pretty high pretty quick. So.
Can I just, a question to the chair on that, when that does happen, does the province pay the bulk, or are we still paying our 70% of that investigation if it's a, say it's a matter that happens outside the municipal boundaries?
Yeah, so if it's outside the municipal boundaries, then the province themselves are to pick up their portion of.
If it happens within trail, we pay the 70% of all that overtime.
Exactly.
Fine, thank you.
Yes, that is my understanding, Council Cashel. We haven't had one yet, so I can't, well, actually, I don't know. Based on last year, maybe there was something that we do know that we had a few problems, but yeah. The explanation that I ever ended up getting on the overtime really never squared with me, but at some point I can kind of move forward on it.
Yeah, you spend a tremendous amount of your time in trying to track down the overtime, if I do recall. Thank you.
But again, whether or not the sleuthing, I can say that, it's great to see that our numbers are this year are a bunch in line with what they have in all the previous years, which again is a good news story. I guess that's what it has been.
I was never really in the administration part with the overtime budgets, but through the chair, just a question would be, the detachment commanders responsible for that overtime budget. And I remember when I worked in the system, when it got close to the overtime being capped, there was a discussion internally. And I also believe there was discussion with city staff. So I would hope that there is protocols in place that would keep us up to date so that we don't get hit with an absolutely astronomically high overtime budget like happened last year.
Yeah.
Are there protocols in place?
Well, great segue for me. I met actually with Shauna Barr, who's the new Interior Regional Superintendent, with the new Staff Sergeant Dave Johnson last week, and that was exactly some of the things that we talked about, being able to show and be in contact with me about. Guess they put some sort of label on the files, which will tell them if they're running into some of that, and then we can have conversations. So yes, I think that, sometimes you know that we don't have enough of the RCMP members, we can bring that, and then the overtime is it wasn't an issue, so maybe you're not focusing on it as much, and then all of a sudden you get the surprise piece, and then now that it's a surprise, now I'm really looking at what's happening each quarter as far as billing going, and they know to send me information. So I think the surprise piece is that I don't want to get surprised again, and also a commitment from the superintendent and from Staff Sergeant Johnson that we would be in contact if we saw something like that happening again. Yeah. We've talked in the past as well that our water utility. It's always been sort of one of those ones that we said, hey, if we've got some additional funds, here's a place that can help not have the rates increases significantly as they are. So that's another kind of question. Of course, on the other three, always good, I think, if you've got some additional funds, let's put it in the capital reserve or the equipment replacement reserve, or again, the bridge reserve. That's one of the things we talked about in 2025 if we did end up with a surplus. So those are more just for bubblings and inside council's mind as we get to the end of the year and the audit financials. For 2026 general fund, as I put together and the pieces of the budget, I'm looking at thinking that a recommended 3.5% overall property tax increase. This budget keeps our operating service levels in line with the previous years. We're not really adding more. We're also not taking it away. One of the things that is important is that for me anyway, the first time in 5 years, and then our staff are strengthening that. You know, our capacity is there. We've got staff doing, and the places, I think, getting healthier. Just even learning your role, many of the staff now are kind of in their second or 18 months or it is, and just even learning the job takes a lot, so that's I think a real positive. A note that we did have another agreement with this Village of Warfield to extend our TRP program, and we obviously have extended, have another year left with Roslyn. One thing that'll be interesting will be what does Beaver Valley do as we kind of turn the corner, because theirs will be renewing in 2027. So curious of those sorts of conversations. I did note, if you were looking as comparatives, that I did move some funds already out of the public works budget just into the parks kind of budget because of the low snow year, and already seeing that we've got staff going in there. So it's sort of a net zero in the sense that, hey, might as well drop this rather than say, hey, we've got this huge deficit here and underage there. So I've kind of taken that as an advantage. I did, in our conversations earlier, council did approve some additional funds out of the general surplus, which we have, which is quite significant for to support the 125 celebrations. I'm asking, and again, much like last year, when we asked for the funding, we'll look at that as far as the 200,000 that I'd asked for COVID funding for IT projects and succession planning. We didn't use as much of it as we could, so there's sort of a carry forward there, but that's sort of where I'm asking again, not because we didn't use it, but I'd like to be able to carry forward some of that use of COVID funds into 2026. This budget also continues on with the ongoing $100,000 increase into the operating capital each year. I think that this is an important document. This sort of again shows sort of where this council and basically, I know that they're all proposed in 2026, but this would be the term that started with this council and with all councils in the province as to kind of where they have been at with the different increases to their taxation base. And the inflationary costs in particular, 23, 24 and into 25 and whatnot, you can really see the effects. Maybe it's a project I should use to go back and look like what it looked like from 22 to the previous term. Now, most places, even in COVID year, had zero, again, which kind of made sense because of everything that's going on. But I would suggest to you that these increases as an average on a term for almost all municipalities are a lot higher than they would have been if you were looking at 4-year blocks. Pretty comfortable that the city of Trail is really living within its means and with our rates. Yes, with our taxation being a bit higher, therefore, whatever percentage increase that we have provides more revenue than a place that's a smaller community. So that's one thing one has to keep in mind. Certainly policing is one of the ones that is putting a lot of pressures on our sister municipalities, and some of them as well, if they've been watching, especially if they get to that 5,000 threshold, is then all of a sudden they start having to pay for their 7% of their policing. That's been an area that's been pressure for our municipalities. And again, too, want to be clear for Roslyn, they've got a 10% increase for 5 years. So they started that in 2025 and they've got that in place for 2026. They're saying 5% is for their operational, 5% is sort of, I think, to try to do what we already do, which is where we're already allocating our taxation revenue into that operating capital reserve. So that's not a thing that we need to kind of catch up with, but anyway, just don't know if anybody has any questions on that, but you can see that those numbers percentages overall are much higher than I talked about this before. Assessment notices, not a big deal this year, but you may get someone that says, hey, the average increase was 0 this year. So maybe you don't get the question, but when we had some of those averages of 6 or 10%, they think that this is a cash cow for the city, but it's not. If your home was at the average, you should expect to get around the average increase of whatever the tax rate is. But if your assessed value went up over that, then you're going to get a higher allocation of the pie. And if your assessed value changed and went lower in 2026, then you should expect to a lower percentage because you're gonna pay less of the pie because your property is valued less. Again, council's already seen some of these. You can see that we're at zero. You will notice that the major industry and business did have some significant increases and so we know that on the regional district side of the equation, that causes them to pick up more of the increase on the regional district side because there's no fixed allocation that we do here at the City of Trail. Municipal taxes, RDKB, is driven by the rates that are or the multiplier rates that are set by the province and haven't changed in 25 years. Again, just a visual graph, you can see that we totally flatlined, but it does show you that if you look at that increase of over double since basically 2019, that the assessed values of the homes in trail residential have jumped up. So here's a slide just kind of showing you some of the changes over the previous year. One of the things that I realized that I hadn't been showing, and because it hasn't changed in so many years, is that there's a residential flat tax here. So sometimes people aren't aware of that. It's $250, hasn't changed, but we kind of always focus on what does change, which is sort of your municipal tax rate, which is your home average, your assessed value times whatever the rate is. And you can see the difference there, about 3.5% increase on a home in 2025. And so, 3.5, you can see the municipal tax was it's a little bit lower this year. What we can get, that's just timing of principal and interest payments coming off. RDKB, you can see that even though their overall increase was 4.8, the average home is picking about 2.1 of that. Again, repeating myself, but just the fact that major industry and business picked up a higher percentage of that. And of course, we're no longer having the mistake of mine recovery. That's all dealt with. So you can see overall between the ups and downs that and also need to be clear that this causes this is only for city and RDKB because we don't usually get the numbers for BC assessment. They're not usually the major ones, but BC assessment, hospital, those things that we don't have them yet. So, but they will also be part of the calculation. So again, $38 being that on that average home increase in 2026 based on a 3.5% staff proposed increase for 2026. Here's just looking at the average single family dwelling, just the funds that you would be paying towards the city, which again is your property tax, get the flat tax, the debt tax, then your water and sewer rates, and then the parcel tax. I think that this really does give the best view because we did a pretty good job and did note, and I think I mentioned to council that many people did not read the insert that we put in the envelope with your taxes and came in and we would say, hey, did you read, why is this up so high? Like, did you read the insert in your envelope that you're holding in your hand? And it's like, no, I didn't. So, but this really, I think it kind of explains, yeah, you got $38, flat taxes unchanged, property tax is just minimal kind of there. We knew that the water rate went up, that 187, but that's because the water parcel tax was taken out of it, and we have no increases for as far as the sewer rates. So you can see overall in 2026, your average home about $73 increase, majority of the cost actually going into the water fund. Yes, Ken.
Just a question to the chair. The residential flat tax, is that something that's applied to most municipalities or is that unique to Trail?
It is unique to Trail and I believe Kimberley. The only two places, and there's some history to it that I'm not 100% why. And I think that it's actually unique in that the province approved it way back in the day.
Is it something we ever looked at, perhaps through the chair eliminating?
I haven't, you know what I mean? Again, it's almost in the same conversation as that water parcel tax. This is something that I haven't looked at. Kind of probably made enough changes over the last number of years here that could be something into the future. But it's a fair question, as we talked about before, that kind of having that flat water parcel tax that hasn't had any inflationary increase over time has meant that it's become, could have been beneficial if it had been part of the water. You would have been at a higher rate even now kind of thing, rather than sort of making the changes that we have made in the last 4 or 5 years here on the rates for utilities, especially water. But yes, that's something that I haven't done a lot of history on, but kind of baby steps.
Yeah, thank you. Just one final question. So that 250 applies to any residence? It could be a $100,000 house
Mhm.
versus the,
That's correct. Yeah. And I think that part of it at the time was because you look since 2019, yes, the property assessed values have gone up, but before that, they were pretty low.
Yeah.
And this was part of making sure that I think that each home was sort of paying, that you weren't sort of that progressive tax. I've got a more expensive home, so I pay more taxes. It's like everyone should at least have this kind of flat tax. But yeah, I haven't done a deep dive on it myself. It's been there for a long time.
it's something we can readdress.
Yeah, we can look at, yep, and
Thank you.
maybe for even now that you mention it, we'll do a little history and then be able to talk to it when we kind of do our public presentation on it.
But yeah, there's an element of just fairness there that would concern me right now, based on, everybody gets the same tax, even though your property could be worth 10 times more. Thank you.
I will look into it for you. So again, trying to work with council on the sort of like where things change at the, 3.75 means that you're going up $40 or 3.25, $35. You can see down below sort of what, 3.5 creates a surplus. Right now, we're at a slight deficit. And, just gives you some of those numbers as to where the changes are. If council said, hey, we don't like what you proposed. Talk about this pie again, just at length, and we'll talk a bit further when we tackle the numbers of what we're seeing, because council wanted to see what's happening with major industry and other communities. You can see that utilities and residential and business, but major industries in that 60 to 61%. We do also really like to make sure that our taxpayers know that when you get that bill, that about 43% of that is only from the city of trail taxes that we're collecting on behalf of the regional district, we collect on behalf of the hospital and the school. One thing that will be very interesting to me is what does a school tax look like in the current year? They haven't said a lot, whether or not, although I do know that if you've got a property that's assessed over, I think $2 million, that they did increase that percentage for school tax. So again, interested to see that. Not too much of an issue in our area, but certainly if you're in Vancouver or West Van, those sorts of areas. So a couple things here for me that I thought were quite interesting, and certainly I know one of the statements, and I different ways of looking at things, but thought it was important to show kind of the largest percentages of taxation allocated to major industry. So you can see at Kitimat, it's a pretty staggering number. And again, I've got some of the slides that Spurs speaks to, dollar values of far what's going on there. So that was quite something. Tumbler Ridge and Trail were in there. And obviously some of them, as we go through some of the percentages, you can see that Castlegar's down in that 28% range. They did have sort of a work with their particular large industrial taxpayer. They're getting a disagreement, I think, on taxes. So I thought it was important too, because it's not easy to compare one community to another. So we didn't even look at Kitimat. Their total assessed value is almost 4 billion, and Tumbler Ridge is at 500 million. But you do get to see what portion of the taxes sort of not fit, but how much of the assessed value is actually for Tumbler Ridge. You can see Kitimat, the assessed value of their property is 51%. Whereas Tumbler Ridge is 18% and Trail is at 14%. So kind of curious, but these are all things that one has to consider when looking at how you're doing your allocation. If your property is 51%, then you know, that makes sense that you'd be paying that higher amount. Some of these other ones here, and as we look through things, I notice a bit of a trend and I'll speak to it. It may not be popular, but I will talk about some of those things as we go at it. And just even for me, when I look at Castlegar at 28%, that's what their taxation in the major industry is, but the actual assessed value is only 4% of the entire amount of the assessed values of all the different properties in the municipality. So one of the ones that I thought, a couple of reasons for me on this that I thought were important, and also speaks to a couple of things that are sometimes unfair. You know, we're at $1.8 billion of assessed value. You can see that City of Castlegar is at just over 2 billion. So we're not far from each other. You can see that the residential makes up, 78 and 74%. They've got a bit more on the utility side. Major industry at 4, we're at 14. You can see that business is actually, pretty close to each other, both at 11 and 12%. And when you see who's kind of paying for the tax side in the City of Trail, you can see that kind of allocation to residentials. We're not far off of, on the tax collection dollar wise from City of Trail versus the City of Castlegar, and you can see the percentages there. But if you look at the very bottom, you'll see that we're collecting 18 million and they're collecting 12.5. Now, one of the reasons for this is because the city has all of the recreational assets. And so we're paying for operations of talc and the rinks and all those sorts of things. Whereas the City of Castlegar, for example, that would be all regional district. Right, so in the same way, though, for us, you would say, well, wait a second. You guys are paying for, Castlegar's paying for their fire department inside their taxes, and you guys are going through the regional district. So that's true, but we also know that City Castlegar has a volunteer chief, and so most of their staffing are volunteers versus a regional district thing. So there's all these different things that makes it difficult to do comparisons at. But one thing I will note is that when you look at the assessed values of both businesses, is that the City of Trail has done, I think, a very good job of being competitive. And when I say that, meaning that your multiplier or what your mill rate is for your business property is at 6.8, 2.42 multiplier. They're picking up 8% of the total taxes, whereas in the City of Castlegar, you're paying, and again, when you look at our rates, our mill rates are pretty close to each other as far as 2.82 and 2.83 between residential, but that the business is at 11 as their rate, so at 3.89, and they're picking up 23% of the total taxes from Castlegar. So you'll see a bit of a trend there, and I think that there's certainly a reason that Trail has made sure it hasn't, making it competitive, well, better than competitive, being an attractive for someone to come here with in a class 6 or a business, because your taxes for your businesses is at a much lower rate than some of these other ones that we'll look at. And again, population 8,400 to 922. So again, I did look at Kitimat, similar type of population. But you can see, even our awesome tech major industries at 258 million. The Alcan must be quite the facility. It'd be something to see at over $2 billion worth of assessed value, right? It's really quite something. And you see that they are paying $63 million in property taxes. But you got the part of it is that at a 2 billion types, assessed value facility, what kind of revenues are also coming out of there, right? And that's also something that's got to be really important for the community to think about, when you're, again, asked to look at different communities and what's happening. But this was something I thought was, trying to look at some of these comparable pieces. You do see, again, here, our multiplier for businesses is again much lower. The residentials not paying as much on the multiplier in itself. You can see that they've got a 5.55 multiplier even on their 2 mill rates. So the residential component, as much as it's in line with around our assessed value, that the rate is producing $5.9 million. So here's another one with Cornell, which I thought, again, getting close again to having some comparatives that make sense. You've got population of 8.4 compared to 10.3, residential all the way through. Again, their major industry is less than half of the assessed value that than what Tech Trail Operations is. And you can see that their businesses are in that same sort of line. Again, when you look at their multiplier for Quesnel, 16.7 is the mill rate for your business entity, and they're picking up 20% of the taxes. And again, that's where you've got a major industry at picking up 51, 11. Numbers aren't that far off, but you can kind of see that even on residential, they're a bit higher. Yes, they're collecting more taxes than we are, and that's a factor. But you do see that again, residential and if the major industry drops in the residential, you can see where the business rate here is much higher than we have here in Trim. And then one of the last ones I did here was Prince Rupert. Part of it was trying to pick the communities that had similar types of populations. As soon as you started getting down to people that have 2,000 and stuff like that, it really makes it difficult, I think, to compare. Again, residential assessed values at 74. This was also another one that had the major industry, which has the port and close again in value. You can see that they're at 38%. Again, the trend being who's sort of picking up the amount. Yes, at 38%, residential and business are in that same relationship, but also that business is their mill rate is 22. So if you think about $22 of every 1,000 is what kind of your assessed value is, that's what you're paying in taxes. So if you had $1 million property, that's what you're taking that 100,000 and then multiplying it by that mill rate. So you can kind of see where we are competitive here right now, and I think it's important because we want to attract business here, but it is also one of those questions that we talked about that you would get pushback. But if you were adjusting that multiplier, that it would be difficult for a business to say we're not competitive because we're uber competitive now. So if you made that adjustment in 10 years, it might not be as competitive, but you're still likely in a place where you're not at some of the mill rates that we're seeing in some of these other communities that have a significant major industrial taxpayer. So I just put this slide in just as a kind of a flavor for council. And maybe a bit unfair because the tax recovery seems to maybe be taking out the reallocation of major industry. I didn't do that on purpose. I'm just trying to show between what we know right now between an average single family dwelling. If you were to have that 3.5% tax increase and council decided to do a reallocation of 1% of the major industrial tax, and this is only focused on a home and the average home, you can see that they would get an additional $40 this year. That overall increase in 2026 would be about $56. Without knowing yet what's happening with BC assessment, school tax, hospital tax. And again, showing here it's at $113 if you were just looking at maybe the better one to look at is at just under city only. This would be what the ask would be from the average single family home. And again, for me, I bring this forward just because we've had the conversations. Conversations are to continue, but some potential processes, I said, in looking at it and getting some further information on conversations that have happened over the past years on major tax industrial reallocation. Obviously at 60+%, that's pretty high. Trying to work that down over time seems reasonable. However, I also recognize that it's not easy for council. We have taxpayer is a lot of pressures going on. But in theory, the other part that we're not necessarily in a place currently is that we haven't had some of the conversations that hey, we're willing to work with you, but if we're going to make an agreement on this, like for example, we still have some BC assessment appeals that are out with the Supreme Court of BC saying, hey, if you're working on this, we don't want to see any more appeals on this. Are there, some of the comments that they said like, hey, we would work with you on helping with some potential leasing or property kind of thing to make to try to create opportunities for additional revenues for subdivisions and those sorts of things. So there's some work that needs to be done, I believe. And again, too, just we already know, and we talked about that they are very good corporate steward in our community. Not only do they pay a significant amount of our taxes, but they are also there. And I can imagine the list of asks of every year, if you had it in front of you, how many community organizations come and ask. And then I think that they're very generous that way as well. So again, I know the council and myself want to keep that relationship in a positive and working with them. So some of the things that I bring forward today is that, it could be something that to consider to make a, in good faith, 1% allocation in 2026, with an understanding that if there was anything further, that would be sort of a new council in theory, and looking at an agreement if you could get there, and if you couldn't, then maybe that's where it ends. And it could also be that at this point in time, it's this council, without some of this information in place, we're not ready to make that commitment. And that's okay as well. I think that just even having the conversation and moving towards it is something that I think would be valued by, by the management of tech. And again, how do we work together? And so anyway, I just leave that just as some comments that came on my own mind. And then the last slide that I had was, kind of for me on the next steps. We're taking us a while, but we're still like to be a couple of weeks earlier than where we're at, but we're just doing way better than we have been in the last couple of years, where I'm like, okay, it's April 28th. You need to, give me a number because I have to get into the count, into the province by the 15th. I would like to get an understanding from council, just on the proposed tax increase. What does that look like? Is there any decision or direction right now as to the implementation of the major industry? Just thinking about where we're at for budgets. My goal would be out of this is to take any feedback that I get from here, update any information that we have from sort of Belisky and those sorts of things, and bring that to the April 13th account meeting, and understanding that going out to a public budget presentation on the 13th, which then gives a full couple weeks before we would bring anything back for any feedback from the community. Hopefully we get people to attend, hoping that potentially we're, going to be inside our newly upgraded council chambers. So we hopefully welcome the community to do that. We would, the plan would be that on that April meeting, the second meeting in April, that we've had the first 3 meetings, and then again, we'd have more of a gap, and then we would be able to hit that May 11th regular council meeting with knowledge that I need to have everything into the province by the 15th of May. So I know that was a lot today, and I don't know if you want to take a break or ask any questions. I have a couple more documents to look at. They're more high level.
When do we, through the
Well,
chair?
Counselor Benson has her hand up
sorry.
first. And then we'll get,
I was just gonna give my view on
Okay.
it, if that's okay.
Mhm.
I'm not against it. I agree in terms of being good neighbors and making sure that the industrial tax is fair. And thank you this is a lot of work to get all the details from other places in the province. I guess I'm just like, why now? When number one, like I forgot about the BC assessment thing, we still don't have an answer on that, which could affect the bottom line for our taxpayers anyway. They're on the verge of a merger.
Yeah.
We potentially are on the verge of an amalgamation.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's good that it's brought up so that we can start like proper discussions. And get something that is really well thought of and sustainable for the future. I just think it's too early to make that kind of arrangement on such little information. But I'm not like opposed to it, but I just think we need more information to make that decision. And I just wanted to confirm that the 3.5 is separate from
That's correct.
it would be a separate line item.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't even know if it'd be a line.
Or not a line item, but a separate
Yes,
add-on to-
exactly.
That's just my view.
okay, thank you. Counselor Cashaw.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you, Councilor Benson. I have to agree. This is probably for me the single most important decision that I think I've made on council or will be making on council. So I guess my question is, at some point, are we going to address it in this term and not pass it off to the next term? So my feelings are is that we do a deferment. We really have time to collect more information. I'd also like to get more maybe feedback from the steelworkers local. I realize we're negotiating with Tech and it is between Tech and Trail. But other partners and other players in this would be helpful, other businesses, other stakeholders. I just feel, and I agree with Councilor Benson, I don't have enough information right now to make the decision.
Mhm.
In that sense, I'm not comfortable even allocating the 1%. I know it's a reasonable suggestion and I'm not opposed to working with Tech on this reallocation, because I know right now having 60% of reliance on one taxpayer puts our municipality at risk. But I also know that even if we were at 50% and things were to happen that Tech couldn't make their commitment, it would be devastating for Trail, even at 50%. So my concern, I'm trying to reconcile that $2 million discrepancy that we would be taking from Tech. We have to put it on local business. You brought this up, Councilor Hanson, last meeting, and it goes on our taxpayer. And I'm having a hard time with that, because as much as I want to be fair, and I think the 60% is high, and I know that, norms are probably down to around 40%, is finding the rationalization to justify that $2 million allocation to our local businesses and taxpayers. Tech made 280 million last year. I mean, they are a profitable company. And is it fair? I mean, that we already ask our local taxpayers and businesses to pay more when they're already, I think some are, especially some of our local seniors that are on fixed incomes. I agree with Councilor Benson, though. I do want to work with Tech. I think that their request is reasonable and it's fair. And it's something that I think, as the general manager's job is to ask. But I'd like more information. So my suggestion would be to defer this. Plus, I also think that we want all council present when this decision is made, because this is a huge decision. This is a policy that's going to set financial strategy for the next decade plus. So I want more information as well. And I don't know what that looks like exactly, but maybe we could postpone this for another meeting so that we can get more feedback.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And so part of it came out of the, part of the reason why it's kind of here. We have been talking with them. We've been kind of bringing it forward. That slow process, I think, is not a bad thing. And I don't necessarily know that they were fully expecting that, but I think that they want to see us moving towards, again, the information, bringing in front of council, explaining it. There will be some that will never, I agree kind of that, but I do also recognize that as you look through the numbers, you do see that, that if we were to get into a place where we were more sustainable with allocations, which I think is a good thing, that we wouldn't be out of line with other communities that have, business rates or residential rates. So, and I think that that's, again, something we try to flush out. It's very difficult to compare us to something that doesn't have that major industry. And so that's where I think focusing on what we were seeing with those numbers, that was the one that really sort of popped up. But I'm not really one myself at home to want to pay more taxes. I get that. So I understand the strain and also appreciated some of that feedback I got from others that have been around this table longer, saying, there's some conversations, and then, hey, meanwhile, I go, you guys say, yeah, let's go and do this. And it's like, well, hey, by the way, we just got an assessment, we're gonna challenge our assessment from here on in. Those would be some of those things I think that you need a little bit more meat on the bones of, like, yeah, we're willing to work with you here, but we also want to make sure that we're being that partnership and getting something that has I don't want to say sell, because that's not maybe the right way of thinking, but allowing you to have the information to make that informed decision that you can stand behind it, but even if people don't like it.
Just through the chair, and part of it would be selling, because it's our job to convince people that we're making the right decision. The question, I guess, that popped up when I was doing some of my research on this is the question through the chair to the CA would be how much of a 2 million shift could reasonably be absorbed through natural tax-based growth over the next 10 years. And I know Councilor Henson brought that up last time. So these are the questions that I think we need answered. Thank you.
Yeah, and those are sort of the unknowns. The other thing that I was also trying to look out, you know, some of the debt that comes off, right? So you're not paying that debt, so that in theory, yeah, unless a new project comes along that needs debt, but says the debt comes off, and some of that cash flow that you're asking from the taxpayer, you know, absorbs, or you're maybe not changing that when they were thinking they maybe get a bit of a break, but that helped fund this changeover. Again, when you've got a big major industry in the community, yeah, it's hard not to say like, hey, I'm on a pension, I don't have this type of increase, but in the same boat, there's risk here, and my job is to sort of, I think, explain that to the community and to council. I'm also never been brave enough to run for council, and so those are not things that when you're knocking on a door that someone says, I saw that you voted for this, and those are the sorts of pieces that you get. But I think that needs to be more meat on the bones if you're going to make that decision. So, I'm not gonna have that, I don't think, by the time we even make the decision this year, sort of thing. So that's part of, like, again, appreciate some of the more information that you would like to see. I just don't think that I'm gonna be able to get someone there to sign off on, you know, we're gonna do this, or what's our residential expansion going to be, and all those unknowns. That would be something that it would be very difficult for me to do now for this year, or even kind of future wise.
So just so I'm clear, these are discussions that will likely be going on in the next term. We're not gonna make a decision likely on this, in this term on the,
My
reallocation.
only thought process is that in good faith, you might say, I'm willing to go for, like I said, from 60 to 59 or whatever it is. But that's it.
Okay.
No commitment further until we get an agreement that says you know, some of the things we've just talked about.
Okay, thank you.
So that's a thought process that I had. That, again, this is just me thinking, it is not council's direction.
Yeah, I think if we went to the 1%, again, through the chair, we're kind of telling them that we're looking at that as a, you know, the big package, right? So that's why we're looking to even do that this year.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanson, did you have your hand up? No? Councillor Benson?
Mhm. On the slide with the pie chart, it says major industry 61.
Yeah.
Who's the other 1%?
What's that?
Who's the other 1%?
It is them, it's
Oh, it
yeah,
just
so
comes up.
it was, and part of it, as I did all this work, as you said, as you noted. Is that one of the things that happens is, and I don't necessarily do the pie chart the same way that the government does.
Yeah.
In that we have certain entities like Fortis Gas, Fortis Electricity, that they have sort of utility tax, but what they also do is they pay a tax on whatever revenues that they earn from the sale of those
Right.
products. So if you actually, if you were to look at the numbers that I had there, and it says 60%, it's because the $180,000 that we get for the 1% from TELUS and from Shaw Cable and from BC.
Yeah.
If you take that and add that to the tax number, which is in our tax number, I just was always sort of, I don't have the ability to change that number because it is how much gas do we sell in the area, then we get a number. So it's not the same as me saying like, hey, under taxes, although it is tax, it's classified as property tax, and that's why it's in the number for the province. So if I add that $183,000 to the utility number, that's what makes that go to 60% based on the province versus me saying only taxes that we actually set the rate and charge out to our different assess the classes is what makes up the that number. And that's where when I do that math, then it's 61. So I know it sounds silly to say, but that's kind of where we're talking the 1%.
And then just through the chair. So what do you need from us today? Like, I don't think we're gonna get a good sense. of,
Yeah, and again, if it needs to carry on,
Yeah.
but at some point in time, you know, tech's gonna wanna know, I
Yeah.
need to make some decisions, right? And then part of it, maybe even if the feedback, like I said, we don't have everyone here today. But even if there's feedback that comes back and says, you know, not ready for that this year, that's the sort of thing that I just need to know that part.
Do you have enough feedback to go to them to have another conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, no, I think I do, and just, I think it kind of maybe explain, some of the things that we talked about, some of the, I think would. If I'm on the side of the table that you guys are, that I want to be able to see, we're doing this in agreement with that.
Mhm.
And this is where we came together. I think that they are reasonable, to do that, but the fact that we're open and willing to discuss that with them, I think was the first step, because I think that maybe in the past that wasn't even really a conversation that was,
Right.
was willing to go forward. So those are sorts of things for me, and I know that there's 5 of you here, and that's not everyone, but if it's that sort of a flavor, that's just sort of that direction that I would need to do, because if otherwise I'm kind of coming to the public meeting with, a different number of like, hey, council feels that, yes, we want to do this, that's a different public
Yeah.
presentation versus like, not right now, not that we're against it, but we need more information kind of thing. So I think that those are fair comments. What I would hope, more importantly, I guess even in this part, is what does council think about the 3.5 kind of on the general increase?
So, Councilor Martin wanted to, have a comment.
Yes,
Did not?
thank you, through the chair. I agree with what my fellow councilors are saying. I'm glad that we need everybody, we can have a consensus that we need every councilor here. But we also have to, the taxpayers and make sure they understand what's going on here. We're not just shoving another 1% onto them. So they fully understand the reasoning behind where we're going with this.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and quickly, I also agree with what everyone has said. And it does look like the small businesses are the ones that are the most affected. I think it's a really hard time right now that we are in, that they are in. They've got the tariffs that are affecting them. We've got a few small businesses that are shutting down in town right now. And not only that, but who knows where this war is going to go. Very unstable economy right now. But I wanted to mention that even in the beginning, when this was first met or mentioned at our major industry taxation committee meetings, Tech was very willing to work with us. They understood that this was a big step for us and something that we have never entertained before. So I think that's a very positive move. We certainly don't have all the information that we need. So I would suggest that I would like to make a motion. No, and the motion would just be that we not increase the taxes, the major industry. Or decrease the major industry tax by 1% this year until we have further information that council is all involved in and comfortable with at this time. I'm not going to talk about the 3.5 at this time. I just think I want to make a move on the 1%.
And that was just my suggestion to you, like, again.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it was a good suggestion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. And all those. Is there any further discussion on that? No, okay, we'll wait till next time around, Counselor Wilson.
Yeah, we'll vote. on this.
All those in favor?
We're voting on a plaque for me, right? At the start part. Okay.
That was unanimous.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank
no,
you.
I appreciate that very much on the direction.
And just through the chair, the 3.5%, I think is a reasonable request. I'm happy to see that amount being put forward as a suggested tax rate. I don't know if you need anything from council on that, but I make a motion that seems like a reasonable tax rate based on the information that you provided, and I'll set that.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Is there any comments or further discussion?
Maybe for public consultation, if we had snacks, if people would come. And then they can see the new room too.
Fair, I'm willing to do that, but only.
Just really want you to end
Just-
this term on a
I
bang.
hear you, but only if we get the snacks, just let us know we all have to stay, eat them, if no one shows up, that would be the only caveat that I would have.
Deal.
Counselor Hanson, go ahead.
I think 3.5 right now is. We have just come into
some excess revenues that, we could potentially reallocate.
Mhm.
You know, if we're looking at the cost of all the things right now, the costs, food increase. Those that have rental, properties in the area, so housing shortages. Their only increase that a landlord could give is 2.3%. So a property tax increase of 3.5. That landlord is not recouping the funds on the difference of that tax increase. I think we need to be very cognizant of the dollar value with the regional district amounts. And I think at this time, I'm not prepared to move forward at a 3.5% until we get a bit more of these numbers dialed in with these revenues and seeing where that sits us with revenue and excess funding.
Great, great statement. One thing that caveat for me always on is that, for example, on a rental home, if they're getting a 2.3% on, say, $1,000 a month rent.
Mhm.
Then their tax portion of that is not at that's, so you're getting a 2.3 on $1,000. Which then if you're getting a 3.5 on the smaller portion of your taxes, that's one of the things one would have to be careful with. It's not the same sort of thing.
No, but I think as a whole, it's that if you add food and you add all of those other increases
Yep.
that, really are affecting. And inflation only went up 1.7%, so if we're thinking of, those that are seniors and on fixed incomes, what is that like for them as well?
Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. I think that Councilor Hanson brings up a good point, and yes, we collect for the 30 kV. It's different from our 3.5, but that it does affect our residents as well. And just wondering if there've been any updates on some of the questions we had.
Yeah, so my understanding is that both the CAO and CFO are away on lengthy spring break vacations.
Okay.
So we didn't hear anything back from any of them at this point in time. And when I would talk about the regional district, that's where I would say that currently their increase is about 2%, but only because the business and major industries picking up a larger portion of their request for 2026. So that's where you're kind of seeing a lower on the residential tax part. Now, again, I guess as you can also look back on that chart, especially the line chart that showed how much regional district taxes over the past 6 years has been allocated because of that. Yes, you get a bit of a break this year, but in the past, we have definitely residential has picked up more of their costs over time. So
Was it, it's 100,000 1%.
Sorry.
What was it, the number you had?
159,000.
Okay, for 1%. So we chatted about the reduction of potentially bringing or opting out of the building inspection, which was like a 330,000.
Yeah, so the challenge with that is that in the agreement that we have with them, we have to give at least 6 months notice. So if you're trying to deal with that and.
Just kind of if we could shave that down to make up for the municipal one.
We would be able to do it in the current year.
Okay.
That's the challenge with them because of the timing of where we are at
Okay.
and council making that decision. And when we would be able to tell them, you basically almost a full year into paying that particular cost. And then as Councilor Martin's right, trying to explain this to people, it's not easy. It's not easy for me sometimes even to get my head around it. But even if we were to find a savings of saying, we're going to bring building inspection as an example into the city's operations, our taxes would need to go up to cover the costs, right? And then the hope is that the regional district lowers the taxes. Right, and so that you've got that balance, right? And that sometimes is the challenge because you don't always see, or they like, well, maybe we'll use the building inspector as a fire inspector kind of thing, right? And so then it's like, well, yes, you're not paying it inside your building inspection regional district portion.
Yeah.
But now it is in the fire service, right? So these are sometimes the challenges that doesn't always have a equal, like, hey, you brought this in, had savings, and I can see a savings automatically.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen.
Okay, thanks.
And the only, not the only, but just timing wise, and I appreciate what Councilor Hanson is speaking about, and that's where for me, there was a few things as we talk about these things. On where some areas that you could touch, like, so for example, because we've got a bit of a surplus, you could say, you know what, let's not do a bridge reserve amount, right? So you could lower your taxes this year because you say, well, I'm gonna reallocate some of the surplus this year into the building reserve and then take it out this year completely, which then would help you. Again, it means it's one of those things that, you know, always inflationary, but those are the sorts of tools that you could use. But it would be good for me to know if you're like, hey, I want this percentage, that's where I need some help because I have to go back and recalculate it. And depending on what levers you pull, that starts for me to say, okay, we got to cut back on some service if we're going to, or we need to cut back on some of the budgeting. And those are all things that we need to look at and be asked to do. And this is where I come to you with hopefully a package that I feel comfortable that we've looked at these areas and that we're sustainable. I don't know sometimes what's going to happen with our CMP over and under. I don't know what's going to happen with, you know, even in the current year, not a lot of snow. But what does that look like in November? So there's always it's a budget, but that's where if council is thinking about this, what I'm kind of hoping for, I'd said 3.5. I'm not tied to that number, but it would be good for me to understand what it is so that I can kind of prepare for that public statement and then start to create the, you know, and then, because again, these are all conversations that if you're like, hey, I would prefer that we look at this amount, you figure it out, Colin, come back to us. And in fact, when I look at my sheet, there's a couple of small changes there that are either up or down, that are minor in some aspects, but I believe that you could lower, but what is sort of, where's the couple level for council? Because I don't, if you're saying like, hey, we want a zero, that's the sort of thing that I need to understand as well, right? So there's sort of some room to move here, but I need some help so that I can bring something forward for our public discussion.
Councilor Benson had her hand up.
How confident are you in the building permit surplus surprise that we're gonna keep that?
Well, they cut us a check.
Uh-huh.
So I gotta believe if you are actually depositing money into my account, that that there's an accuracy there.
It just, yeah, it's so
Are you
weird.
suggesting if I, to the chair, that 320 be applied to the 3.5?
No, we wouldn't be able to do that, right? Because it would count as surplus for last year in which we could put to a reserve.
Could be.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
4 years, but finally got it.
Go ahead. Sorry, and thank you to the chair. My, obviously, I mean, we came into, council, all of us, with a number of years of minimal tax increases and aging infrastructure. So we have been trying to play catch up for the last 4 years. Of just things that have been spent and trying to get caught up with funds. Where we need to for those things, like every community of our age. But I would like to make sure that we don't put us in a position where, you know, our labor increases are X and our tax increases are Y, and we're sitting in the gap, not being able to keep that in line. So I would propose to see maybe a 2.99, keep it under that 3 mark.
Yep.
Then it's still potentially in line with what our union agreement for wage increases and such are. Looking at what that looks like, or potentially could we see what that looks like?
Yeah. Absolutely,
next.
and that's where I tried to show, you know, if you went at 3.5 versus a 3.25 and to go down, down to a 3 is again too, there's levers to pull there for me, right? Like you said, especially because we kind of have that one-off that you could say, you know what, let's put the $100,000 into the bridge reserve out of 2025 and not have anything like that automatically, or go back to a 50, much like you did this year, right? Same as what you did. If it comes around again, yeah, maybe we do. Those are again some of the levers. And like I said, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but you know, there's a couple of other small questions. The only one that really has an effect is the other ones you've already committed to, but there was a question for me just on, and we didn't necessarily have a full sum for me. We had $152,000 as far as our act out they had asked for 159, but we hadn't really kind of got that nailed down. So there's another area of like, well, do we give them 159? At the end of the day, it's minor when you add up the millions of dollars that we do. There's different ways of getting there, and to have the, you know, again, the 3.25 means we've got a deficit of 64. Compared to right now, we're at 24. And so in theory, that other 0.25% would be another 40. So you'd be $100,000 short, basically, at 3%, 2.99. Again, on the scheme of what's going on here, there's different ways of getting there. And that's, I don't want council to be afraid of
So-
that.
The chair, maybe I can make an amended motion that you can work between, say, 2.9% and your 3.5 that you suggested, use that as your parameter. Does that give you something to work with?
It certainly does, yeah.
Is that
Again,
fair then?
for in that, it sounds like in that three, again, just for myself, like the 2.99 sometimes, I mean, I hear it say that, but I think we all kind of know the grocery store.
Walmart,
You say three.
Walmart used that.
Yeah.
That's a sale. That is a sales. That's a sales technique there, Counselor.
Again, for me, at 3% is something I think that we can work with. I would be suggesting to you then, that's where leaning on some of that surplus and maybe taking off a portion of the amount that we allocate in the bridge reserve, because that is one of those ones that we do. We don't have any burning, like, you need to get dealt with it today. And I know that council has worked really hard at putting money aside there, so now you have a good chunk of money. So that would be something that might be a way of getting us, protecting what we've got for our increases for collective agreements and that sort of thing, keeping in line with that. Is that eventually I'm thinking that would be something you're not gonna just continue to put into the bridge reserve forever, right?
That's true. Go ahead.
There is a motion on the floor that needs to be there.
Well, it was a question, 2.9 or
To 3.5.
wasn't it?
On the floor.
Well, the motion that would be, 2.9 to 3.5 would be the range of,
So
tax
we're gonna
increase
second
that
that.
we would like to.
The only question is, the range causes me just a bit of,
3%? You want
I'm just gonna say, if you guys wanna kind of go there, like, that would be a preference.
I have
but
none, Counselor Harrison. We're gonna-
Re-amendment?
Amendment on the amendment, let's go between 3% and 3.5%.
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any questions or comments on that? Councilor Martin, did you have something to say? No. So we're at 3%,
To 3.5.
A range,
sorry,
a range from 3.0 to 3.5.
3.0 to 3.5. Okay, Councilor Benson.
Just, did everybody look at the Silver City Days budget? That was also.
Are we still paying for that? Come on.
Okay,
There was other things on here.
we have an amendment to the
Yeah.
motion. All those in favor of the amendment?
The range.
3
Yeah.
1 to 3.5.
No.
No,
Sorry,
3.0.
3.0 to 3.5. Opposed? No opposed.
Awesome, thanks, guys, we'll bring that forward and probably just have maybe
Thank you.
what the numbers look like for your cow meeting, but probably, you know, again, talking about getting into the decision out of there, because I gotta go to the public and say, here's what kind of our numbers are, so.
I was serious though, he did include the budget for Silver City Days.
I saw
No, no,
that there.
we're gonna get
Are you
there.
gonna go on
Yes,
that?
it's,
Okay.
yes, so,
That
I apologize.
is left
Yeah.
before we can break for dinner.
yes. So there was, for me, wanted to bring in front of you, so now I'm looking at the kind of where we're at point in time, so this is at 3.5, that's what we're looking at. Because there's a couple of asks that are in there. Number one, I just wanted to kind of see where we're up and we're down. In most cases, if we're doing better, like as an example, interest income, I had budgeted 325, we ended up at 412, that would be under columns A, Y, and BA. And row 15, so you can see in most cases we were pretty much in line, although you'll notice that our other revenue from wood sources is quite a bit higher, and that main factor, as we talked about, is because of this sort of one time out of the blue building inspection revenues that we received. Taxes and everything else are basically in line with what we had thought. The benefit for me, as well, as that we were able to do well, didn't get to some certain things, but we didn't use as much of the COVID funding that council had agreed to in 2025, but I'm asking for some of that to be brought forward in 2026. We did know, or council was aware, that in getting the use of, or the climate the manager of planning and climate action, that we were using some of the grant funding that we received from climate action to pay for that position. So that's again under row 20. We had a budget of 30. I didn't use any of it this year because basically all we did was planning. He hasn't really done other than now kind of getting into doing some planning. So I felt comfortable that we didn't need to touch that particular reserve. So that allows us to, we will be using it to help fund that position in 2026 and onwards. Get down below, we are trying to do a parking kind of analysis. And so part of that, I would say, being funding out of the parking reserve that we had, which has about $75,000, which again, I think is a wise use of those funds. Then the use of general surplus, you'll notice that we've kind of always had something there. Part of that's been the funding of council special projects. That's where we've sort of used it. And that's where the 50,000 is there. Last year we used about 12. That was to do some appraisals, different works that we had done on some of the things that council asked for. The current year it's at 110, and you'll say why? And the reason is because council agreed to use $60,000 in surplus to help pay for the Trail 125 celebrations. When again, I look through general government, protective services, you can see the gap, engineering and public works, and also you can see the gap on budget versus actuals. Parks and Rec, it's over. Yes, we knew that. We've discussed many times the reasons for some of the work that we're doing on there. Airport is lower than budget. Again, main factor there being that there was less revenues for fuel and then less expense. And that was the main piece there. And then the library grant transfer is bang on. The sewer tax transfer, we talked about those. You'll notice that I got those in the wrong column. So that's interesting. But under row 41, that 206,550, we agreed in our utilities that should go actually into the water, shouldn't go, none of it should go into the sewer tax. So anyway, that's just a number in the wrong column there. But in 2025, we had 76 of the tax transfer going to sewer and 130 going to water. Again, trying to take that rate pressure off of water. That 206 will solely going into the water tax transfer. The capital projects, you can see that we've been increasing that, which I think is one that I think you want to do because we know that capital is not getting less expensive, and this is one that I think is a pressure point. And so continuing that, I would suggest the equipment reserve. Again, I was spoke about why that's higher than budgeted. It has to do with some sales of or trade-ins and sales of some of the surplus equipment, so that money should go in there. Climate Action Reserve, why that's out there is because we would be expecting that reserve would be allocated because it becomes part of the revenue. That's an assumption. It's out a number of years because they front end loaded for 3 years. I don't know in another couple of years, considering how broke the province is, whether or not some of those fundings will increase, but that's not something we need to worry about today, but just letting you know that's where the climate action funding that we received, that we put that into the reserve, and then we're using a portion of that reserve to pay for our climate action manager. Here's the one for me that again, the old bridge reserve, we had budgeted 50, we're looking at 50. I've got 100 in the next couple of years. This is probably the area, like if council's saying, I want to be at 3%, I'm thinking that either goes to 25 or to 50 and some other numbers I look at, and that gets us to 3%. I think that's totally reasonable and doable, and I think good for the community. Also, hopefully maybe would be something that tech would be pleased to see that we're at, as the higher taxpayer of what they're paying. The fact that if we drop that 0.5, that's actually almost as good as getting a bit of a, that allocation in the current year, right? So that's another, would be a good selling point, I think, for council to consider in the current year. So that's where I think that I will probably focus. Down below here under row 73, this is where the 150 is matched with the asking for civil COVID funds in row 19. So there's the negative 150, and then us using having an expense of IT assessment and upgrades of 150. The trail 125 extra expense is 139. It's already inside the general government for trail, and then we're using $60,000 under that row 22 in the BEC column. Why it's up higher than previous years from surplus to make that trail things happen. The parking study, there's the expense side I talked about there at row 21. There's the 40,000 coming out of the reserve to fund the parking study, so that again, that doesn't touch the taxpayer. And then the last one for me here was, if council, it's a minor amount, but they had asked for 159, our budget has been 152. Is council okay to 159? Are you bothered by it? Is it's like, well, if we're pulling back ourselves, maybe ACDEB needs to stay where it's at as well. So that was just one kind of question that I was hoping to get some direction on from council as well. And so the last two is that I have the council budget and pretty much, pretty close for what we didn't all happen in the different areas. As far as where we were budgeting at the time, we didn't know what keeping rule would look like or FCA, but most cases, some of the areas, some people didn't go to things, so AKBLG, and that should say actually, I think Kimberly versus Radium. But for me, it's always what was the total expense and what the budget was, and we knew that the housing was the one that we wanted to attend, and was an expensive conference, but I think overall council stayed right within the lines of what was budgeted and what we expensed. But when I look at 2026, we've got sort of this again, a laid out budget. We're increasing the budget slightly from 38 to 40 based on last year's total and the allocation of funds that we're seeing under the different conferences that people usually go to. I don't know if anybody has any question about that budget. It seems reasonable, unless you want to cut it in half. We can, no, okay. Not seeing that. Then the last one was the Silver City Days. One of the things I thought was important is that there was Miss Lucchini working with our Midway contractor was able to negotiate a kind of a what we say, a bonus?
Signing bonus.
Yes, signing bonus. And so you see the Midway revenue kind of jumping up in the current year. That's not because we're getting a better rate sort of thing. It is about the fact that us signing on with them, that there is a front end bonus in the current year. All the other kind of amounts are pretty similar. I am conservative on the events. You could see the High Prov pulled in a really big chunk of revenue, which is the big factor as to why we ended up in a big surplus in 2025. But in the current year, I'm pretty conservative on Sean Hook. We hear things are, sales are going well. So that is something that may be low and we may benefit from, that particular event going on. Most of the other there's some reallocations almost internally between these different budgets in 2025 and 2026. But the one thing that we did do was because we got the signing bonus and because there was a big request for 125, let's have more fireworks. We're putting that additional signing bonus into the fireworks budget for 2026. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about kind of what's happening with the budget. You'll notice that we're less the taxpayer. Big factor on that obviously is the having a budget on we're expecting to get some additional revenues from the fact that the Sean Hook event that's happening on May 8th. Don't know if anybody has any questions about Silver City Days. Nope. Okay. So then the only question for me is just, it's very small at the end of the day. I know you've given me direction, but is council okay with the 159 for ACDEB or do you want the 152? That's the only kind of question I had. It's sort of minor, but I just was interested in what your thoughts are.
Okay, with 159. Okay.
I personally would just like to see the 152. Just in terms of not really seeing what the two additional ones would be allocating the funds to. The chamber specifically didn't have a community futures kind of zipped through theirs, but they didn't focus on it, and I didn't see anything in terms of what the additional funding for the chamber was, so I'd rather just see the original.
Councilor Hanson, I'm of the same mind as Councilor Hanson.
Me too.
Me too.
Okay, so there you go. So
You wanna give up money now? All these years.
Thank you. So
I'm to tell you the truth.
You get hungry. You just get hungry.
Box.
You're not making rational decisions.
I apologize.
Thanks for your time. It's a long afternoon. I'm
Thank
sorry,
you,
guys.
Mr. McClure, for that
Oh.
great report, though. Yes, it was very detailed, very easy to understand, and you were very patient with us. Okay, so, on to our reports other. We have the Downtown Trail Improvement Committee, a request for grant. Counselor Hanson, did you want to speak on this?
Certainly, yes. So, at the Downtown Trail Improvement Committee meeting, they were looking for a way to support the local businesses during AKBLD. And so basically what it was a grant that would come from the city for the individuals coming for AKBLD, like they did in Kimberly. Whereas if that or the local government representative could go and redeem that for $15 or $10 off at a local business of a group of businesses that have put together that have all wanted to contribute. And then, so it would be basically like a rebate program back to those local businesses for getting the people here in the door to those businesses.
Right. So my understanding it's called the Trail Tenor Voucher
Yes.
Program. And I believe that Councillor Butler mentioned that it was $10.
Yeah.
Per voucher, and, that would go to each delegate that is at the convention.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so to the delegates.
And then that money can be spent at stores that are participating.
Yes.
yeah. a small
And
business
then if
downtown.
they didn't end up getting used, then they weren't getting those $10 rebate. So it would be up to an amount of 3,000, but if they don't get redeemed, then it could be significantly less.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Vincent.
It also spoke about a locally produced
Mhm.
keepsake. Is that separate from the trail tenor?
No, that's, that'll be with it. Yeah.
That's part of the 3,000.
I guess my next question is this has become out of our grant funds?
Could, council casual, you've also got your, council special projects kind of number
Okay.
where you could just.
It doesn't need to go through the process of.
Not officially as a grant.
I wasn't thinking as the grant, we might not go that way, you could put underneath your council special projects sort of piece, then you're not having to kind of a formal thing and a vote. And
Right,
because
okay.
things happening in the next, this 3 weeks,
Yeah.
4 weeks sort of thing, so.
Councillor Vincent.
We did have this in Kimberly. Was it the AKBLG that did that though, or was it the city of Kimberly? Like, should this be?
I think it was, no, it was
KPLG?
it was the city that put it together, yeah.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Hanson, but didn't Councillor Butler reach out to Kimberly to see what process they went through
Yes,
to
yeah,
get it?
this is basically following in how they did it. Just to get people in their downtown core spending money, doing things while they were there.
I didn't know that one, that showed me.
I know.
It's
not true. The pay for that.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's.
Is there any other questions on this? Okay. Is there somebody to move this first of all? Thank you. A seconder, please. And all those in favor? Oh, that was carried.
Oh, I just get a tenor because it's $10.
Yeah.
I'm not, okay, I was like, do you mean tender? But
It's not Pavarot.
Henders. Okay, let's move on to question period. Is there anyone for question period?
No one's still going around that one.
Okay, the next motion that I need is that council consider and resolve to rise from the committee of the whole. All those in favor? That was carried. And the next resolution to exclude the public, recess the public meeting until 6 p.m. and immediately convene into the closed session. So the resolution is that pursuant to section 90 of the community charter, the public be excluded from this portion of the meeting as the subject matter being considered relates to the following. The community charter section 91L, discussions with municipal officers and employees respecting municipal objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual municipal report, and further that the public portion of the meeting be recessed until 6 p.m. and further that council immediately resolve into the closed portion of their meeting. Thank you. All those in favor? And that was carried.